Chapter 734. Yu Qianqiu stood silently at the side. He didn't know what was going on, but after talking to Bai Changchun that night, he knew it was the work of Demon Lord Thousand Swords. He seemed to be specially used to trap the immortals in the immortal world. That madman was too vengeful, and he wouldn't let others have an easy time even if he died. This was a secret, and he couldn't tell Immortal Lord Crocodile. Am I seeing things? Why is there so much soul-transforming smoke here? Who did this? Immortal Lord Crocodile muttered to himself in shock. He turned around and asked, Yu Qianqiu, do you know what's going on here? What do you mean what's going on? Yu Qianqiu said disapprovingly. This place has always been like this. I don't know how long it's been here, but we've always called this place the Fog Forest. But is there something wrong? Always been like this? Immortal Lord Crocodile was speechless, and his face darkened as he pondered. Yu Qianqiu waited silently for a while, then asked, What is this soul-transforming smoke you speak of? Immortal Crocodile suddenly raised his head and stared at the ever-changing seven-colored mist. He said in a daze, That colorful mist is the soul formation smoke, which is extremely poisonous. Once you come into contact with it, no matter how high your cultivation level is, it will be useless. I don't know where this thing came from. Even in the immortal world, it rarely appears. Most people have only heard of it, and I've only seen it once. Why is it here? And it's so big, and it's been gathering here for a long time. So powerful, Yu Qianqiu exclaimed, then asked knowingly, Old monster, what are you doing here? Is this place related to your trip to the immortal world? Immortal Lord Crocodile stared at the fog forest and nodded slightly. There's a passage connecting the immortal world and the mortal world here. It's called the Immortal Ascension Stage. I was about to use the Immortal Ascension Stage to ascend to the immortal world, but who knew this place would be sealed by the soul-transforming smoke? Heavens! If the people of the immortal world descended without knowing anything, then wouldn't it be a trap? It was definitely a trap. Who did it? This is too vicious. Since you want to go back to the celestial realms so badly, why don't you think of another way? Is there any other way to get to the immortal world? Yu Qianqiu comforted. In fact, he also wanted to know if there was any other way. Suddenly, an eagle circled in the sky. Immortal Lord Crocodile raised his hand without even looking, and the eagle was instantly pulled down by him. It drew an arc in the air and flew into the colorful fog, then flew out and stopped in front of the two of them. At first, the eagle could be seen struggling in the air, but after a while, the color of the eagle's feathers became brighter and brighter. Finally, like a specimen, it froze and stopped moving. Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed slightly and retracted his hand into his sleeve. The eagle fell to the ground and turned into a puddle of pitch-black water. Other than the Immortal Ascension Stage, there are other ways to get to the immortal world through the underworld and the demon world. Forget about the demon world, it's basically impossible to enter. And the underworld's emperor of the underworld has never been on good terms with the immortal emperor. If I barge in without the underworld's permission, only death awaits me. With my current cultivation level, don't even think about it. Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head helplessly. Unless my cultivation level is so high that I can shatter the void and open a new path. But then again, if my cultivation reaches that level, no one will be able to stop me if I want to pass through the netherworld. Then what should we do? Yu Qianqiu said with a look of pity. If that's the case, doesn't that mean you can't go back? We'll see. Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed and turned to face him. You don't owe me anything anymore. I'll teach you how to break the blood oath. From now on, we have nothing to do with each other. Seeing his disheartened look, Yu Qianqiu laughed and patted his shoulder. Old monster, don't be discouraged. There must be a way. Maybe we just don't know about it yet. Since the blood oath hasn't been broken, do me a favor first. After dawdling for so long, he finally got to the point. Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyes turned cold. He stared at the hand patting his shoulder and said indifferently, If you have something to say, say it. Obviously, he was not impressed by Yu Qianqiu's actions. Yu Qianqiu sheepishly withdrew his affectionate hand and said with a chuckle, You also know that I want to find the purple flame. Why don't you accompany me to the Eastern Holy Land? You can go by yourself. Why drag me along? Moreover, I don't know where the purple flames are, Immortal Lord Crocodile said expressionlessly. Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly. Have you forgotten? You're not the only one sealed in the heaven and earth Qiankuan formation. There are many old friends of yours inside. It's too dangerous for me to barge in there with my cultivation level. You mean you want me to protect you? Immortal Lord Crocodile snorted. You've got the wrong idea. Even if I want to help you, I'm afraid I won't be able to. If my old friends are still in the East Holy Land, I won't be able to protect you with my current cultivation level. How is that possible? Yu Qianqiu was shocked. Aren't you old friends? If there's any trouble, you can just tell them. After all, you used to be one of the 12 great immortal lords, second only to the immortal emperor. Don't tell me they won't give you face? Immortal Lord Crocodile laughed coldly. After a while, he asked, what do you think I relied on to rise up in the celestial world? I climbed up step by stepping on the corpses and shoulders of others. I've offended countless people. If they find out that my cultivation level has fallen to such a level, think about the consequences. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. As expected, where there were people, there would be grudges. The celestial world was no exception. After a moment's hesitation, he suddenly looked up at Immortal Lord Crocodile and said in a low voice, Are you afraid of them? If I were you, I would definitely take back the glory that once belonged to me, not hide. If you don't even dare to face the East Holy Land, why do you want to return to the celestial world? If you ask me, the East Holy Land is the place where you can start anew. Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyes flashed as he stared at Yu Qianqiu. An uncontrollable aura circulated around him. After a long while, he retracted his aura and narrowed his eyes. Although I know you're trying to provoke me, but I agree. Yu Qianqiu was delighted. He didn't care if Immortal Lord Crocodile saw through his provocation. As long as he agreed, it was fine. He took out a few silver balls and prepared to set up a formation. Unexpectedly, Immortal Lord Crocodile shouted, Wait! Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He raised his head and frowned. Are you going back on your word again? Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head slightly. You don't look like someone who knows his place. Before we go, let's dissolve the blood oath first. Otherwise, if you keep causing trouble, won't I be dragged down to death by you? Yu Qianqiu opened his mouth but was speechless. It was really difficult to control this old monster. However, he couldn't force him, so he could only nod and agree. Then, Immortal Lord Crocodile began to teach him how to dissolve the blood oath. After spending some time to learn it, the two of them cut the blood talismans drawn on their palms at the same time. They put their left palms together and chanted to use their magic power. A bloody light flashed across their bodies and flowed from their left arms to their palms. After the two bloody lights met on their left palms, they suddenly exploded with red light and disappeared. The two of them withdrew their left hands at the same time. There was a pool of blood in their palms. Yu Qianqiu shook off the blood on his palms and said angrily, Are you satisfied now? Immortal Lord Crocodile's face was cold, as if nothing had happened. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He flicked out a few small silver balls and pretended to set up the array. After he was done, he pointed to his side and gestured for Immortal Lord Crocodile to stand up and prepare to leave. Unexpectedly, Immortal Lord Crocodile looked puzzled. He stared at the few small silver balls on the ground and said suspiciously, I remember that you used 6 silver balls to set up the array. Now you only used 5. Are you sure this is okay? Could it be that you made a mistake? Yu Qianqiu's face twitched. He didn't expect Immortal Lord Crocodile to be so observant. Even he himself had forgotten how many silver balls he had used earlier. He said angrily, I know better than you how to set up the array. Immortal Lord Crocodile thought about it and stopped talking. He just looked at him deeply, then silently stood beside him and closed his eyes. In the blink of an eye, he felt the surroundings change. He heard Yu Qianqiu's voice. It's done. Thus, when he opened his eyes, he discovered that he had returned to the forest where he had left the Eastern Holy Land. Immortal Lord Crocodile was amazed when he saw the magic of the teleportation array again. He followed Yu Qianqiu, who was walking out of the forest, and said, Yu Qianqiu, if it's possible, can you teach me this array? Yu Qianqiu walked through the forest and said without looking back, "It's not that I don't want to teach you, but you can't learn it at all. I'll tell you the reason when I have the chance. You'll know then." Seeing that he was unwilling to teach, Immortal Lord Crocodile didn't say anything more. After the two walked out of the green forest, they saw the shining moon lake. Their eyes moved and were attracted by the situation at the bottom of the brown stone mountain. They saw many cannibals surrounding a tent. They didn't know what was going on. They looked at each other and felt a little curious, so they quickened their pace. Someone saw them from afar, and someone immediately exclaimed, "The warrior is back! The warrior is back!" The crowd outside the tent looked over. Garland was the first to squeeze through the crowd. She ran straight into Yu Qianqiu's arms without any hesitation. She hugged Yu Qianqiu's head and kissed him. Passion was like fire. Yu Qianqiu felt a little overwhelmed and quickly pushed her away. He pointed to the tent that everyone was surrounding and asked, "Garland, what happened over there?" Garland immediately said, "An immortal was injured. He fell into Moon Lake while flying from the sky and bled a lot. When the tribesmen fished him out, he was unconscious, but he's awake now. He won't let us go near him and is sleeping cross-legged in the tent." An injured immortal? Yu Qianqiu and Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at each other and immediately let Garland lead them over. When they arrived at the tent, Immortal Lord Crocodile opened the tent without hesitation. Yu Qianqiu followed in, while the others were obviously afraid of the immortal and did not dare to enter. When Yu Qianqiu saw the person sitting cross-legged in the tent, he was shocked. The injured immortal was none other than his master, Bai Changchun. Chapter 735. Bai Changchun, who was sitting cross-legged, suddenly opened his eyes. When he saw Immortal Lord Crocodile, his eyes immediately became spirited and full of fighting spirit. When his gaze landed on Yu Qianqiu, he was startled. After sizing them up, he retracted his fighting spirit and slowly closed his eyes. He could probably tell that the two of them were in cahoots. Yu Qianqiu was extremely shocked. Although he knew that there were experts from both the netherworld and the immortal world in the Eastern Holy Land, Bai Changchun was simply an invincible legend in his heart. He was already used to his status as the world's #1 expert. He never imagined that he would be injured, and from the looks of it, his injuries were not clear. His symbolic green robe had been torn in many places, especially between his chest and abdomen. There was a large hole in it, and blood could be seen. A palm-sized wound could be seen. It was unknown what caused the wound. The bottom of the green robe was stained with blood, and it had already dried to a dark red color. Although his thin face was still full of arrogance, it looked somewhat pale. Yu Qianqiu was agitated. He quickly turned around and set up a soundproof barrier in the tent. Then he squatted down gently and half knelt beside Bai Changchun. He gritted his teeth and said, "Master, who injured you?" Bai Changchun did not say a word and did not reply. He quietly regulated his breathing and healed his injuries. Immortal Lord Crocodile was a little surprised. "Yu Qianqiu, he is your master?" Seeing that Yu Qianqiu nodded and admitted it, he could not help but carefully size up Bai Changchun. In the end, he was shocked to find that he could not see through Bai Changchun's cultivation. His current cultivation was at the late stage Exalted Immortal. Based on this, wouldn't the injured person's cultivation be higher than his? But the strange thing was that he could tell at a glance that the injured person's physical body was not an immortal body, but a human body. How could a human body withstand such a high cultivation? This was too unbelievable. His eyes flickered and fell on Yu Qianqiu. He was slightly stunned and immediately thought that he understood. He also couldn't see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, but this kid was only at the crossing calamity stage. Yu Qianqiu and the injured person were master and disciple. In that case, the master and disciple belonged to the same sect. They must have practiced some strange magic art, which was why people couldn't see through them. Otherwise, the mortal body would not be able to withstand such a powerful cultivation. Seeing that his master did not reply, Yu Qianqiu said anxiously, "Master, I think I should bring you back first. This damned place isn't suitable for healing. Instead, it will consume true essence." After waiting for a while, his master still did not speak. Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth and was about to forcefully bring him back to the demon region when he suddenly saw Bai Changchun let out a sigh of relief. He opened his eyes and stared at Immortal Crocodile. Late-stage exalted immortal cultivation. For you. When he said this, Immortal Crocodile was shocked. He could see through his cultivation. Was his cultivation really higher than his? However, from Immortal Crocodile's slightly suspicious look at Yu Qianqiu, it was clear that he suspected Yu Qianqiu had revealed his identity. Before he could reply, Yu Qianqiu explained to Bai Changchun, "Master, he is a new friend I met. He was originally one of the 12 great immortal lords in the celestial world, Immortal Crocodile." Bai Changchun was moved when he heard this. He looked at Immortal Crocodile and said in a low voice, "According to what I know, there are 2 immortal lords in the celestial world who are in charge of this continent now. Their cultivation has reached the mid-stage immortal emperor. But I see that your cultivation is only at the late-stage exalted immortal. Why is that?" From what he said, it seemed that he had done a lot of research on the East Holy Land. Immortal Crocodile fell into deep thought and muttered to himself, "There are actually 2 alive. I wonder who they are." Yu Qianqiu quickly explained to Bai Changchun how he had rescued Immortal Crocodile. Only then did Bai Changchun's doubts disappear. Bai Changchun looked at Immortal Crocodile with some sympathy. He didn't expect this person to be suppressed for 100,000 years. He nodded slightly and said, "I see." However, he looked at Yu Qianqiu with a strange look. This disciple of his was considered a talent. He really dared to barge into any place. He really had to give it to him. "Master, I think I should bring you back to treat your injuries. It's not safe here," Yu Qianqiu said anxiously. He knew that someone who could injure Bai Changchun to this extent must be an expert from the celestial world. Since he had already fought with someone from the celestial world, this place was definitely not safe anymore. Perhaps someone would come to search later. Unexpectedly, Bai Changchun shook his head indifferently and said, "Gain or lose is my fate. Since I'm here, I won't go back easily. Don't say anything more. I know what I'm doing. I can still take this little injury." "Take it?" Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth when he heard this. He thought, "Old man, what are you doing? You've already been beaten to this extent, yet you still want to save face and suffer. Do you really think that the Eastern Holy Land's immortals are as easy to bully as the cultivators?" But Yu Qianqiu also knew this old man's temper. He couldn't force him, so he turned and asked, "Old monster, do you have any more healing elixirs?" Immortal Crocodile wasn't stingy. He raised his hand, and a porcelain bottle flashed into his hand. He handed it over and said, "This is the Yin-Yang Rejuvenation Pill. It has good healing effects. For human cultivators, as long as they're still breathing, they can recover from their injuries. 1 pill is enough." "Thank you, old monster." Yu Qianqiu took the bottle and was about to open the cork when Bai Changchun raised his hand and pressed it down. Bai Changchun shook his head and said, "There's no need. This time, I was at a disadvantage because my body couldn't bear my cultivation. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been injured. Although I'm injured, it's not a bad thing for me. I've already faintly comprehended a trace of the great Tao of reforging the body. There's no need to rush to heal. Leave the wound for me to study." Reforging the body. Even Immortal Crocodile couldn't help but exclaim. He looked at Bai Changchun as if he was looking at a monster. Perhaps Bai Changchun and Yu Qianqiu didn't know what this meant, but Immortal Crocodile was shocked. The word rebirth popped up in his mind. Yu Qianqiu looked at the wound on Bai Changchun's abdomen and didn't know what to say. However, he also knew that no matter what he said, it would be useless. Since Bai Changchun didn't even use the elixir, he should just continue to comprehend it. He didn't return the porcelain bottle to Immortal Crocodile. Instead, he put it away and asked curiously, "Master, who exactly did you fight with? How could someone injure you like this?" Bai Changchun didn't hide anything and simply said, "I heard that the great feudal lords from all over the world have late-stage great immortal cultivation, so I directly went to challenge the nearest one. Who knew that there would be a group of guests from the immortal city in that great feudal lord's mansion? After fighting, I was besieged. I killed some of them and injured others. I was also injured by 3 late-stage great immortal cultivators, But in the end, I managed to kill them. Because I wanted to find a place to heal, but I wasn't familiar with other places, so I instinctively wanted to return to the place where I first came. In the end, due to my heavy injuries, I landed here. That's roughly what happened. His words were really very simple, but Yu Qianzhou's heart palpitated when he heard it, and he cursed in his heart. The old man was too crazy. He heard that the great feudal lord had late-stage great immortal cultivation, and he went to challenge him. How high is your cultivation? Can't you tell me a little? He actually skipped the feudal lord and went to challenge the great feudal lord. He was really crazy. What did he mean by a group of guests from the immortal city? How many people were there in this group? The so-called siege, how many people were besieged by? The so-called killing and injuring some, how many people were there? How high was their cultivation? The old man did not speak of any of them. He only mentioned them briefly. But Yu Qianzhou could imagine how intense the fight must have been. At least, it must have been an intensity that he had never seen before. It was just that the old man didn't want to talk about it. The only thing that he could describe was the combined strength of the three late-stage great immortals. It was obvious that the three of them were not ordinary powerful, but they were still killed by him. Based on Yu Qianzhou's understanding of Bai Changchun's character, he was very sure that the battle was more intense than he had imagined. Bai Changchun had not been forced into a corner. Otherwise, with his arrogant character, how could he instinctively avoid healing his injuries? Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Bai Changchun solemnly. He didn't know whether this person was telling the truth or not. If he could kill three late-stage great immortals who had joined forces to attack him, then his cultivation had already reached the early-stage immortal emperor? As far as Immortal Lord Crocodile knew, among the people from the immortal and netherworld realms who came to fight the Thousand Swords Demon Lord, there was no one with the cultivation of a minor immortal. The others with the lowest cultivation were at the early stage exalted immortal. Most of them were great immortals and above. And he couldn't see through his cultivation now, so this person's cultivation had at least reached the great immortal realm. But what puzzled Immortal Lord Crocodile was how the human body could withstand such a high cultivation. How exactly did he do it? Yu Qianzhou didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He asked, "Master, may I ask what realm has your cultivation reached?" Bai Changchun paused and thought for a while. "I have already integrated the heavenly spirit into my life soul." "What do you mean?" Yu Qianzhou was stunned. When he didn't get a reply from Bai Changchun, he turned back to Immortal Lord Crocodile and said, "Old monster, what is the cultivation of integrating the heavenly spirit into your life soul?" Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyes flickered. Integrating the heavenly spirit into your life soul represents the early stage great immortal cultivation. He stared at Bai Changchun and said, "Your cultivation is not bad, but I find it hard to believe that you could kill three late-stage great immortals with your early-stage great immortal cultivation, not to mention that there were others surrounding you." The meaning behind his words was obvious. He clearly did not believe what Bai Changchun had said. But Yu Qianzhou believed him without hesitation because he knew Bai Changchun's character. This was a person who was so proud that he wouldn't lie. He said in shock, "Master, so your cultivation has already reached the early stage great immortal. No wonder you could kill that underworld messenger so easily." Bai Changchun ignored him and looked up at Immortal Lord Crocodile. He said coldly, "Whether you believe it or not, what does it have to do with me?" The atmosphere in the tent suddenly became tense. Chapter 736. Although there was no hostility in Immortal Crocodile's words, his tone was so rude and disdainful that it made Immortal Crocodile's eyes glow fiercely. He stared at Bai Changchun with a murderous look. On the other hand, Bai Changchun was still calm and collected, not taking Immortal Crocodile seriously at all. "We're all on the same side, don't hurt our friendship." Yu Qianzhou smiled apologetically as he tried to persuade Immortal Crocodile. Although Immortal Crocodile's cultivation had dropped, he still had his pride and skills. How could he stand someone looking down on him like that? But when he glanced at the wound on Bai Changchun's chest and abdomen, his murderous intent began to recede. He slowly said in a low voice, "Your injury has not healed yet. When it is healed, I will come and ask for advice from you." With that, he turned and walked out of the tent. Only the master and disciple were left in the tent. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and sat next to Bai Changchun with a bitter smile. He scratched his head and said, "Master, I have something to say, but I don't know if I should say it." Bai Changchun's deep gaze stared straight into his eyes, causing Yu Qianqiu to not dare to look directly at him. However, Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth and braced himself to say, "Master, although your cultivation level is high as a person in this world, how can you rather break than bend? Even if it is for your own good, there is a time." Master, this is really not very good." As a disciple, he could not say too much and could only stop. Yu Qianqiu thought that Bai Changchun would be unhappy to hear this. Unexpectedly, Bai Changchun looked at him and smiled. He nodded and said, "Yu Qianqiu, what are you pursuing in this life?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the smile on Bai Changchun's face and was stunned. It was rare to see his master smile. After hearing this, he thought for a while and said, "I am actually a lazy person. In fact, I really want to live a carefree life like Senior Nongzhu. However, your disciple's mortal heart is too heavy, and there are many things that are difficult to let go of. Furthermore, there is always a sense of crisis, so I have no choice but to work hard. If you must say that I have a goal, I hope that one day I will have the ability to let myself and the people around me live a truly free and unfettered life. If my ability is a little stronger, I hope that I can let everyone in the world live a little better." Bai Changchun smiled faintly and said, "Are you tired of living?" Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly and nodded, "I'm a little tired in my heart, but the path is chosen by myself. After walking so far, I don't want to turn back. I want to continue walking, hoping that my wish will come true one day. Continue to work hard." The smile on Bai Changchun's face became warmer and warmer. He sighed slightly and said, "You are an amazing person. You have a strong heart, a sense of responsibility, and a sense of responsibility. In fact, your heart is much stronger than mine, so you are destined to be very tired, but this is also why I like you." These words caused Yu Qianqiu to feel a bit embarrassed. He rubbed his nose with an embarrassed smile and said, "Master is too kind. How can this disciple compare to you? Your indomitable spirit and invincible cultivation have always made this disciple very envious. This disciple can't even beg for it. I know my own situation very well. To put it bluntly, this disciple is just a selfish, vile person. How can I compare to Master?" Bai Changchun gently waved his hand and said, "You are wrong. Who in the world is not selfish? People's hearts are made of flesh, not stones that can pave the way. They can sacrifice themselves for passers-by and have no regrets. A person with a really strong heart, no matter how selfish he is, can distinguish right from wrong, good from evil, and will unconsciously dare to take responsibility. I am not as good as you. Since I embarked on the road of cultivation, I have only done it for myself. It is also unintentional to take charge of the demon domain and bear that responsibility. Now, I have even abandoned the responsibility I should bear for myself. This is what I call being truly selfish." Yu Qianqiu was speechless. Why are these two master and disciple fighting to put the label of selfishness on me? Their awareness is too high. Selfishness is selfishness. How can there be a difference between true and false? You are just feeling a little guilty because you have avoided responsibility. But it is not good to argue with him, so he simply kept his mouth shut. There was a short silence in the tent. "Yu Qianqiu, do you know what Master is pursuing in this life?" Bai Changchun suddenly asked. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He shook his head curiously and said, "I don't know." Bai Changchun's eyes suddenly became deep and bright. The strong battle intent emitted from it was like a bright lamp, illuminating the entire tent. He said in a sonorous voice, "A higher cultivation, a stronger opponent, until I die." In a roundabout way, this was equivalent to answering Yu Qianqiu's previous unbending words. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He knew that it was useless to persuade him. Bai Changchun tilted his head to look at him and said, "I believe you have seen what I buried on the beach, so don't look for me in the future." Unreasonable. It was unreasonable. Yu Qianqiu secretly shook his head. He reached out and took out the storage bag that Bai Changchun buried on the beach. Then he stuffed many small silver balls into the storage bag and offered it with both hands. Master, disciple understands your determination. Don't worry, disciple promises not to look for you in the future. But it is better for you to keep this with you. When you are at an important place, you can casually throw one out. For the sake of our relationship as master and disciple, take it as helping disciple. Perhaps disciple will need it when I encounter some big trouble in the future. Bai Changchun stared at the storage bag in his hand. After pondering for a while, he finally reached out and took it, which was considered a promise. Yu Qianqiu sighed softly. He stood up and bowed. Disciple will take his leave. I will not disturb master's recovery. After that he retreated out of the tent. There was a blue sky and white clouds outside. There was a reflection in the moon lake below. He could smell the fragrance of grass when he breathed. Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath, and his eyes became firm again. Garland, who was guarding outside, also came over and wrapped around him like a water snake. Her ample bosom kept rubbing against his body, as if she was teasing his sexual desire. Yu Qianqiu looked at her with clear eyes and smiled. Chief Garland, please tell the people in the tribe not to tell anyone about the immortal in the tent. Garland immediately agreed and reluctantly left him. It seemed that she was not able to have sex with such a brave warrior, and she felt very uncomfortable in her heart. By the lake, immortal Lord Crocodile, dressed in a silver-white robe, stood quietly with his hands behind his back. His silver hair fluttered in the wind, and no one knew what he was thinking. Yu Qianqiu stepped on the grass and strolled over to stand beside him. He smiled faintly. Don't take it to heart. My master is just like that. He's used to breaking rather than bending. He doesn't mean to look down on you. Before he finished speaking, both of them looked back at the same time. They saw that Bai Changchun had already walked out of the tent. He glanced at the two of them indifferently, then turned into a shadow and flew toward a mountain peak in the distance. They could vaguely see him landing on the mountain peak. Yu Qianqiu muttered in his heart. I don't know what he's going to do again. He's injured, but he doesn't know how to behave. Why is he running around blindly? Suddenly, immortal Lord Crocodile's voice sounded in his ear. Your master gives off a feeling of being one with heaven and earth. This realm is very strong. It's not his cultivation level. I can see that he has a body full of skills, but it's bound by his physical body. Once he is reborn and has an immortal body of eternal life, he will be even stronger. If he can't get rid of the shackles of his physical body, no matter how strong he is, he will be limited by his lifespan. It's a pity that the immortal ascension platform is sealed by the soul transformation smoke. Otherwise, he could use the passage to refine his immortal body. By then, the celestial world will have another top expert. What a pity! Yu Qianqiu nodded and smiled. My master is known as the world's #1 expert, so he is naturally very strong. I believe that even if my master doesn't use the passage to refine his immortal body, he will be reborn and cast an immortal body. Oh, there's such a thing? Immortal Lord Crocodile tilted his head. Why are you so sure? Yu Qianqiu's eyes were firm as he said word by word, because he has always been invincible and can defeat any strong opponent. Even if his physical body can restrain him for a while, it can't restrain him forever. He will break through this shackle sooner or later. I believe that this is his fate. Even if he dies one day, he will only die at the hands of the strongest opponent, not because of the limitations of his physical body. Immortal Lord Crocodile snorted. Master and disciple indeed. Looks like you have a lot of confidence in your master. Not a lot of confidence, but he can definitely do it. Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned around and stared at immortal Lord Crocodile. Because his name is Bai Changchun. The human world has bound him for too long. Now that the shackles have been broken, he will move forward with indomitable will, becoming stronger and stronger until he dies in battle. One day, you will know the meaning of the name, Bai Changchun. Bang! An angry clap of thunder sounded, as if in response to Yu Qianqiu's words. The two of them suddenly looked up and saw the white clouds in the sky suddenly churning and forming dark clouds. The airflow between heaven and earth suddenly became chaotic, and in an instant, it turned into a raging gale. The calm moon lake suddenly became undulating, the cannibals by the lake looked around in fear. They had seen the weather change before, but they had never seen such a sudden change. The tents that had been set up with stakes seemed to be pulled up by the roots. The cannibals immediately got busy, pulling up the stakes and putting away the tents. The wind blew fiercely, and the sky and earth changed color. Dark clouds kept churning and gathering from all directions. In an instant, there was a loud clap of thunder that covered the sky and earth. Only the sound of thunder could be heard, and it was a frightening sight. "Old monster, what's going on?" The voice was like a mosquito buzzing under the thunder. Yu Qianqiu looked up at the sky. Why did it feel like the opening of the East Holy Land? "It's where your master is. I don't know what he's doing." Thunder flashed, and immortal Lord Crocodile pointed at the mountain where Bai Changchun had landed. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu looked carefully and saw that the dark clouds were gathering in that direction. Immortal Lord Crocodile shouted, "Let's go and see what your master is doing." Then he pulled Yu Qianqiu and flew away. The sky was dark, and none of the cannibals running around the lake noticed that the two of them had disappeared. Chapter 737. The two of them flew to the front of the mountain and looked at each other, not knowing what he was doing. Bai Changchun stood quietly at the top of the mountain with his hands behind his back and his eyes closed. Golden light constantly flowed out of his body and wandered between heaven and earth, drawing ethereal and untraceable arcs. Every flowing streak of brilliant golden light seemed ordinary, but it gave off a deep and unforgettable feeling of shock, bringing along an unknown and terrifying aura between heaven and earth. It was as if the dark clouds and storms in the sky were attracted by these flowing golden light. As the golden flowing light increased in number, the simple sketches caused the entire mountain peak to become slightly illusory and blurry. It was as if every single movement of the golden flowing light contained the laws and truths of the world. It gave people the illusion that they were reenacting the formation of this world at the beginning of time, a dreamy and magical process. The sky darkened, and the golden light shrouding the top of the mountain became more and more numerous, making Bai Changchun look like a golden Dharma idol. Suddenly, Bai Changchun opened his eyes slowly and stared at the two of them. He said calmly, "Stay away." Then he closed his eyes again. The two of them were slightly shocked. They felt a strong ancient aura coming from Bai Changchun's eyes, as if he had been standing on this mountain since ancient times. Yu Qianqiu was still in shock, but immortal Lord Crocodile's expression became serious. He pulled Yu Qianqiu and quickly flashed hundreds of meters away. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head and asked, "What are those golden lights outside my master's body?" The rumbling thunder was so loud that he couldn't even hear his own voice clearly. Thus, he transmitted his voice again and asked again. Immortal Lord Crocodile said solemnly, "The quintessential essence in your body is white. When your cultivation reaches the immortal level, the quintessential essence in your body will turn into immortal qi and become golden. Your master is releasing the immortal qi in his body, as if he is communicating with the unknown power of heaven and earth. I didn't expect immortal qi to have such an effect. It's really unheard of and unseen. Amazing. Then what is my master doing? I don't know either. Let's wait and see." At this moment, the flowing golden light suddenly sped up. A series of dazzling thunderbolts shot out from the dark clouds like a series of cannons, meandering and sinisterly striking Bai Changchun's body. After the dazzling white light, it was closely followed by the continuous boom-boom sounds of explosions. Bai Changchun's entire body had been wrapped in lightning, turning into a ball of white light, like a giant incandescent light bulb, illuminating the entire world. "Master!" Yu Qianqiu exclaimed, but the lightning bolts were too loud, and his voice could be ignored. Immortal Crocodile restrained Yu Qianqiu, who was a little impulsive. He stared at the rapidly swimming golden light, then at the sinister lightning that filled the sky. He transmitted his voice and said, "Don't be agitated. Your master is fine. I think I can guess what your master is doing. I think I know what your master is doing." Yu Qianqiu felt that his eyes had been blinded by the intense white light. He narrowed his eyes and asked, "What is my master doing?" "Your master is truly a genius of his generation. Having such a master is enough to make you proud for the rest of your life. Immortal Lord Crocodile stared at the light ball at the mountain peak with a solemn expression. He paused and said, "If I'm not wrong, he is using the power of the heavenly lightning to temper his body. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have believed it. He could summon thunderclouds to borrow the power of the heavenly lightning in broad daylight. Without using any treasures, he can communicate with heaven and earth and borrow the power of heaven and earth. Amazing!" Yu Qianqiu asked excitedly and nervously, "Old monster, are you saying that my master is reforging his body? Can he succeed?" Immortal Lord Crocodile looked back indifferently and said, "Didn't you tell me before that he would definitely succeed? Are you not confident now?" Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly and shut up. He could only blame the commotion in front of him. It would be a lie to say that he was not worried. He did not know what was going on inside the light ball that was surrounded by thunderbolts, but the golden light outside was still swimming around. It was obvious that it was still being controlled. With that in mind, Yu Qianqiu was slightly relieved. After the thunderclap resounded for nearly 2 hours, Immortal Lord Crocodile's expression became more and more shocked. He wondered if he could withstand such a powerful thunderbolt for 2 hours with just his body alone if his cultivation was still at its peak. Just as he was asking himself, the golden light mixed with the thunderbolts suddenly sped up. The atmosphere between heaven and earth became extremely heavy, so oppressive that it was difficult to breathe. It made people feel as if the air had stopped flowing. With the mountain peak as the center, it was as if even time had stopped flowing. Suddenly, the pressure between heaven and earth relaxed, and the thunderbolts under the dark clouds quickly disappeared. The rumbling sky returned to normal in the blink of an eye, with only the wind blowing. The feeling of the tremors suddenly disappearing and only the sound of the wind made people feel relieved. It was as if they had drunk honey, and every pore in their body was breathing to their heart's content. The sky began to turn white, and the dark clouds in the sky quickly dissipated. No one knew where they came from and where they would return to. Perhaps the person standing on the mountain peak would know the answer. After all, he was the one who had summoned them. The light ball on the mountain peak gradually shrank, slowly disappearing or converging into that person's body. Bai Changchun stood there unscathed, unhurriedly twisting the cloth buttons on his green robe. His clothes were obviously brand new. Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. The old man was actually changing his clothes in the lightning? As Bai Changchun meticulously tidied up his clothes, the golden light solidified on the mountain peak also drew an arc and entered his body. After tidying up his clothes, he slowly put his hands behind his back, and a majestic aura was suddenly released from his body. It was like a stormy sea that rolled in all directions, and it pressed down on the surrounding trees at the foot of the mountain, causing them to collapse one after another. Yu Qianqiu was forced to breathe by the aura that rushed over. His eyes rolled back, and he felt the strong pressure pouring into his lungs, about to burst them. Fortunately, Immortal Lord Crocodile released a golden transparent shield of vigor in time, containing him within it. Only then did he have the leisure to look around while panting. The trees at the foot of the mountain fell like dominoes. The aura released by Changchun soared into the sky, and the dark clouds in the sky that had not yet dissipated were immediately dispersed, and they quickly spread up and down. When Bai Changchun retracted his aura, the vegetation within a kilometer radius had fallen into a huge circle, as neat as the crop circles in his previous life. Bai Changchun, who was standing with his hands behind his back, finally calmed down. He looked into the distance quietly, his green robe fluttering in the wind, and his expression calm. Immortal Lord Crocodile retracted the golden transparent shield of vigor and flew to the mountain peak with Yu Qianqiu. Bai Changchun slowly turned to look at the two, his expression calm. Yu Qianqiu looked at him up and down for a while, and did not find anything different from before. He asked suspiciously, "Master, have you succeeded in body forging?" Bai Changchun nodded slightly, expressionless. Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyes flickered, and he said in a low voice, "If I'm not wrong, your cultivation has broken through again." Bai Changchun nodded again and said lightly, "Early stage Great Immortal was the limit that my body could withstand before, and I have been suppressing my cultivation for many years." This time, with the help of the power of heaven and earth, I directly broke through to the late-stage Great Immortal. This is also a matter of course, there is nothing strange about it. Yu Qianzhou's mouth opened, revealing an exaggerated expression of surprise, and then he cupped his hands and said with a smile, "Congratulations, Master." But in his heart he was complaining. Such a powerful cultivation, but he did not take care of his disciple. It was really inhumane. Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head in amazement and said, "I have lived for hundreds of thousands of years, but this is the first time I have seen someone who can withstand such a powerful cultivation with a human body. In the celestial realm, it is more difficult to cultivate one level, but you actually broke through 2 levels in one go. It is really admirable." Immortal Lord Crocodile is a knowledgeable person in the celestial realm. "I have something to ask," Bai Changchun said lightly. Although his tone and expression were a little indifferent, Immortal Lord Crocodile was not angry, because the person in front of him was indeed worthy of his admiration, and he had the right to be arrogant. So he nodded and said, "Brother Bai, please ask, I will tell you everything I know." Bai Changchun asked indifferently, "I've already succeeded in forging my body. I wonder if I can smoothly pass through the Netherworld Flame Sea in the Netherworld Passage with my current body?" Yu Qianzhou was stunned. In a flash, he already knew what Bai Changchun was trying to do. He was so shocked that he was speechless. Immortal Monarch Crocodile smiled faintly and said, "Of course. The Netherworld Fire Sea can only stop those with mortal flesh and blood, but it cannot stop those who have cultivated the immortal body, demonic body, and nether body. Brother Bai can go whenever you want, but you have to leave the heaven and earth cosmos formation first. It's a slip of the tongue. Since your disciple can enter and exit this place at will, it shouldn't be a problem for Brother Bai." Bai Changchun glanced at Yu Qianzhou, then he shook his head lightly and said, "When I was communicating with the heavens and the earth earlier, I've already faintly glimpsed the profundity of the worldly formation of heaven and earth. The worldly formation of heaven and earth can no longer stop me from entering and leaving." Yu Qianzhou looked at Bai Changchun again, dumbfounded. He really admired Bai Changchun from the bottom of his heart. This old fellow's ability was indeed unfathomable. Even the worldly formation of heaven and earth couldn't stop him now. He was really a little too strong. He let out a long sigh in his heart. A trapped dragon rising to the heavens, about to soar to the 9 heavens. Bai Changchun's words were actually meant for Yu Qianzhou to hear, but Immortal Monarch Crocodile was a little confused and couldn't wrap his head around it. He paused and said, "From what Brother Bai said, are you going to leave the Eastern Holy Land and head to the Netherworld now?" Bai Changchun shook his head slightly and said indifferently, "Not for now. I heard that the Eastern Holy Land is ruled by 2 immortal monarchs on land and 2 Netherworld generals on land. Since I'm here, there's no reason I won't know." Chapter 738. After a moment of silence, Immortal Lord Crocodile said slowly, "Brother Bai's methods are unquestionable, but I still have to advise you not to trespass into the Netherworld. You must know that not everyone can ascend to the immortal world, but the majority of them end up in the underworld. In the boundless and endless darkness, perhaps there are some unknown existences that are even more terrifying than the Emperor of the Underworld and the Immortal Emperor." Even Bai Changchun was a little moved after hearing this. He pondered and said, "Immortal Monarch means to say that there is someone in the underworld with a higher cultivation than the Underworld King and Immortal Emperor?" Yu Qianzhou's eyes sparkled as he listened carefully. Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head slightly. "I'm not sure. No one knows where the end of the Netherworld is. On the surface, the Immortal Realm and the Netherworld are equally famous, but that's all on the surface. Those unknown beings that have been silent for countless years are the most terrifying existences in the 3 realms. Those endless places have always been covered by a mysterious veil of darkness. I once heard Immortal Emperor Jintai say that although the Netherworld is the territory of the Emperor of the Underworld, even Bai Qi himself did not dare to uncover the mysteries of those endless places. That's why Immortal Emperor Jintai has never set foot in the Netherworld for fear of attracting unnecessary trouble." Bai Changchun's eyes narrowed slightly, but there was a strong fighting spirit in them. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but interrupt curiously. More powerful than the immortal emperor and the emperor of the underworld? Isn't that a god? Is there a god in that place? I don't know. I only heard immortal Emperor Jin Tai mention it casually. He seemed to be afraid of it, so he didn't elaborate. Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head and looked at Bai Changchun. Brother Bai, if you must go to the netherworld, it's best not to set foot in that endless place. Consider this my advice. Yu Qianqiu secretly cursed. The more advice you give, the more excited the old man will be. He turned to look at Bai Changchun and saw that Bai Changchun and immortal Lord Crocodile were looking into the distance. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but look as well. More than a dozen streams of light flew over and turned into a dozen people with different appearances. They stood in the air and stared at the three people on the mountain peak. One of them pointed at Bai Changchun and said to a golden-robed man with a sinister face, "It's him." Before he could finish speaking, his eyes were fixed on immortal Lord Crocodile. His mouth was agape as if he had seen something unbelievable. Everyone else reacted the same way, their eyes filled with shock. The golden-robed leader's face stiffened. He looked at immortal Lord Crocodile in shock. You are immortal Lord Crocodile? Immortal Crocodile stared at him and sneered. Jin Miao, long time no see. What business do you have here? Could it be that you know that I have reappeared and are here to visit me? How is that possible? The golden-robed man was shocked. Weren't you killed by the myriad swords demon monarch? How are you still alive? Do you wish for me to die? Immortal Lord Crocodile narrowed his eyes. The aura of an immortal monarch that looked down on the entire world had appeared again. I wouldn't dare. The golden-robed man was suddenly startled. He looked at immortal Lord Crocodile suspiciously. Immortal Lord, your cultivation level? The dozen or so people looked at each other. At their level of cultivation, they could easily distinguish anyone's unique aura. It was difficult for others to disguise themselves. They were certain of immortal Lord Crocodile's identity, but their cultivation level was unbelievable. Immortal Lord Crocodile, one of the 12 great immortal lords of the celestial world, should have been a mid-stage celestial emperor. However, even they could see through immortal Lord Crocodile's cultivation level. It was unbelievable. It's all thanks to the myriad swords demon monarch. Immortal Lord Crocodile said through gritted teeth. His words immediately gave everyone an idea of what was going on. They looked at each other with strange expressions on their faces. The golden-robed man gave a look to his left and right, and the dozen or so people floated into the air and bowed. Greetings, immortal Lord Crocodile. Rise. Immortal Lord Crocodile showed the majestic aura of the past. He raised his hand and gestured for them to rise. Then he asked, Jin Miao, what are you doing here? Recently, someone broke into the Great Lord's mansion and slaughtered our celestial world cultivators. I am here to capture this person on the orders of the immortal lords of the eastern and western palaces. After Jin Miao finished speaking, he glanced at Bai Changchun and looked at the person beside him with a hint of doubt. Didn't you say that person was an early-stage great immortal? The reason why he said this was because he could tell that Bai Changchun was in the advanced grand immortal stage with his early immortal emperor stage cultivation. This was completely different from the early grand immortal stage cultivation that he had received earlier. He was starting to suspect that he had recognized the wrong person. The person beside him also felt strange. At the scene of the incident, he could see that Bai Changchun's cultivation level was the same as his. Why couldn't he see through it now? He explained doubtfully, I am sure that this person is the one who caused trouble. As for his cultivation level, perhaps he has some way to hide it. Otherwise, he would not have been able to kill the Great Lord and the others. Yu Qianqiu looked at Bai Changchun nervously, but Bai Changchun just stood there with his hands behind his back and his eyes slightly closed. Jin Miao was sizing Bai Changchun up when immortal Lord Crocodile suddenly asked, Jin Miao, what are you talking about? Who are the two palace immortal lords? He was more concerned about this. He also wanted to know which immortal lords were still alive. Jin Miao was startled. Then he smiled and cupped his hands. Immortal Lord, East Palace Immortal Lord Yi Xiao and West Palace Immortal Lord Jiwu. Yi Xiao and Jiwu. I didn't expect them to be alive. Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed. Jin Miao, go back and report that I will go find them in a few days. I will definitely pass on your message. Jin Miao stared at Bai Changchun and sneered. Please wait for a moment. Allow me to capture this person first. Otherwise, I will not be able to report back empty-handed. Immortal Lord Crocodile waved his hand. You don't have to worry about this. When I see Yi Xiao and Ji Wu, I will explain to them. You go back first. Jin Miao's eyes flashed. Immortal Lord Crocodile, this is not appropriate. Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyes flashed as he glared at Jin Miao and shouted, Jin Miao, how dare you speak to me like this? His aura surged, and he was indeed angry. That surging aura almost suffocated Yu Qianqiu. Suddenly, a righteous aura appeared in front of him, counteracting the pressure he had to bear. Bai Changchun had lent him a helping hand. Jin Miao raised his eyebrows. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and narrowed his eyes. Immortal Lord Crocodile, do you really think that with your current cultivation, you are qualified to be one of the 12 immortal lords? One must know one's own limits. Don't be shameless. I am polite to you because the immortal emperor conferred you the title of immortal lord. Do you really think that you are a nobody now? You want to see 2 immortal lords? Believe it or not, even if I kill you now, no one will say a word. I will definitely take you away. You'd better know what's good for you. Don't make things difficult for yourself. The dozen people around him burst into laughter. They were laughing at Immortal Lord Crocodile for overestimating himself. How dare you? Immortal Lord Crocodile roared. His weakness was poked, and he immediately flew into a rage. He spread his arms, and a majestic aura spread out. He was about to attack. However, someone beside him said lightly, Immortal Lord, step back for now. Bai Changchun stepped forward and stared at Jin Miao and the others. I hope you have the ability to take me away. Don't let me down. Everyone instantly felt an indescribable aura suddenly erupt from that thin body. The entire mountain peak gave off a majestic feeling, as if it had merged with the heavens and the earth. Suddenly, the green-robed body seemed so tall and big. Under that thin face, his lips moved slightly, and a sonorous Sanskrit chant resounded through the sky. There is righteousness in heaven and earth. A majestic pressure suddenly descended from the sky and gushed out from the ground, surging between heaven and earth. It could not be seen or touched, but it felt so clear and shocking. These immortals with high cultivation looked around in horror. The willfulness that they usually had when they soared between heaven and earth disappeared. At this time, in the face of the power of heaven and earth, they suddenly felt so small, Jin Miao's pupils shrank. She looked at Bai Changchun in disbelief and shouted, Kill him! Righteousness, condense! As soon as she finished speaking, the majestic aura in the surroundings instantly condensed and pressed down like thousands of towering mountains. The huge pressure made the eyes of the dozen people who were extracting immortal treasures bulge. Among them, 2 of the weaker ones exploded into 2 clouds of blood mist on the spot. They finally understood that once the power of heaven and earth was unleashed, it was not something that could be resisted by humans. The rest of the people who were extracting immortal treasures had become slow motion. They were suffering from the huge pressure of resisting the power of heaven and earth. Bai Changchun stared at them indifferently, expressionless. Immortal Lord Crocodile and Yu Qianqiu stood beside Bai Changchun. Although they could feel the terrifying power of heaven and earth, they did not feel any pressure. But from the actions of the people floating in the air opposite them, they could see that this inexplicable power was indescribably strong, because 2 immortals could not resist it and died on the spot. Yu Qianqiu's mouth turned into a circle, and his eyes shone brightly. He did not know how to vent his feelings of admiration. In short, this old fellow was still as admirable as ever. Selling cakes. Immortal Lord Crocodile's lips were tightly shut, and the muscles on his cheeks were constantly rubbing as he stared at the thin figure in front of him in a green robe. At this moment, Bai Changchun stretched out his right hand from behind his back. He raised his palm and slowly lifted it up. Under the heavy pressure, A steady stream of air squeezed in from all directions and gathered in his palm. A dazzling light burst out, and the ball of light grew bigger and more dazzling. Suddenly, the withered palm moved, shuttling through the ball of light, changing into an unfathomable trajectory. Finger shadows intertwined, and countless sharp white lights burst out from the fingertips. In the blink of an eye, thousands of streams of light flew like a storm toward the dozen people floating in the air opposite them. The scene of cornucopia green eyebrows being struck down flashed in Yu Qianzhou's mind. He said in a daze, "Immortal lost finger." Chapter 739. After a moment of silence, Immortal Lord Crocodile said slowly, "Brother Bai's methods are unquestionable, but I still have to advise you not to trespass into the netherworld. You must know that not everyone can ascend to the immortal realm, but most of them end up in the netherworld. In the endless darkness, there may be some unknown beings more terrifying than the Emperor of the Underworld and the Immortal Emperor." Even Bai Changchun was moved by this. "Immortal Lord, do you mean that there are people in the netherworld with higher cultivation than the Emperor of the Underworld and the Immortal Emperor?" Yu Qianzhou's eyes lit up as he listened. Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head slightly. "I'm not sure. No one knows where the end of the netherworld is. On the surface, the immortal realm and the netherworld are equally famous, but that's all on the surface. Those unknown beings that have been silent for countless years are the most terrifying existences in the three realms. Those endless places have always been covered by a mysterious veil of darkness. I once heard Immortal Emperor Jintai say that although the netherworld is the territory of the Emperor of the Underworld, even Bai Qi himself did not dare to uncover the mysteries of those endless places. That's why Immortal Emperor Jintai has never set foot in the netherworld for fear of attracting unnecessary trouble." Bai Changchun's eyes narrowed slightly, but there was a strong fighting spirit in them. Yu Qianzhou couldn't help but interrupt curiously. "More powerful than the Immortal Emperor and the Emperor of the Underworld? Isn't that a god? Is there a god in that place?" "I don't know. I only heard Immortal Emperor Jintai mention it casually. He seemed to be afraid of it, so he didn't elaborate." Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head and looked at Bai Changchun. "Brother Bai, if you must go to the netherworld, it's best not to set foot in that endless place. Consider this my advice." Yu Qianzhou secretly cursed. The more advice you give, the more excited the old man will be. He turned to look at Bai Changchun and saw that Bai Changchun and Immortal Lord Crocodile were looking into the distance. Yu Qianzhou couldn't help but look as well. More than a dozen streams of light flew over and turned into a dozen people with different appearances. They stood in the air and stared unkindly at the three people on the mountain peak. One of them pointed at Bai Changchun and said to the leading golden-robed man, "That's him." Before he could finish, he stared at Immortal Lord Crocodile with his mouth agape as if he had seen something unbelievable. Everyone else was the same, their eyes filled with shock. The golden-robed leader's face stiffened. He looked at Immortal Lord Crocodile in shock. You are Immortal Lord Crocodile?" Immortal Crocodile stared at him and sneered. "Jin Miao, long time no see. What business do you have here? Could it be that you know that I have reappeared and are here to visit me? How is that possible?" The golden-robed man was shocked. Weren't you killed by the myriad swords demon monarch?" The Lord Jin King Lord said. "Do you wish for me to die?" Immortal Lord Crocodile narrowed his eyes. The aura of an immortal monarch that looked down on the entire world had appeared again. "I wouldn't dare." The golden-robed man suddenly paused and looked at Immortal Lord Crocodile suspiciously. "Immortal Lord, your cultivation?" The dozen people looked at each other. At their level of cultivation, they could easily identify anyone's unique aura. It was hard to hide from them. They could confirm Immortal Lord Crocodile's identity, but his cultivation was unbelievable. Immortal Lord Crocodile, one of the 12 great immortal lords, should have been a mid-stage immortal emperor. However, they could see through his cultivation. It was only a late-stage exalted immortal. It was unbelievable. "It's all thanks to the Lord Crocodile," Immortal Lord Crocodile said through gritted teeth. His words immediately gave everyone an idea of what was going on. They looked at each other with strange expressions on their faces. The golden-robed man looked to his left and right, and the dozen people flew into the air and bowed. "Greetings, immortal Lord Crocodile. Rise." Immortal Lord Crocodile showed his majestic aura and raised his hand, indicating for them to rise. Then he asked, "Jean Miao, what are you doing here?" "Recently, someone broke into the Great Lord's mansion and killed our cultivators. I'm here to capture this person on the orders of the immortal lords of the eastern and western palaces." After Jean Miao finished speaking, she glanced at Bai Changchun with a hint of doubt. She looked at the person beside her and asked, "Didn't you say that person was an early great immortal?" He said this because he could tell from his early-stage immortal emperor cultivation that Bai Changchun was a late-stage great immortal, which did not match the early-stage great immortal that he had received earlier. He wondered if he had recognized the wrong person. The person beside him also felt strange. At the scene of the incident, he could tell that Bai Changchun's cultivation was the same as his. Why couldn't he see through it now? He explained suspiciously, "I'm sure this person is the one who caused trouble. As for his cultivation, maybe he has some way to hide it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to kill the Great Lord and the others." Yu Qianqiu looked at Bai Changchun nervously, but Bai Changchun just stood there with his hands behind his back, his eyes slightly closed, unperturbed. Jean Miao was sizing Bai Changchun up when immortal Lord Crocodile suddenly asked, "Jean Miao, what are you talking about? Who are the two palace immortal lords?" He was more concerned about this. He also wanted to know which immortal lords were still alive. Jean Miao was startled, then smiled and cupped his hands. "East Palace Immortal Lord Yi Shao and West Palace Immortal Lord Ji Wu." Yi Shao and Ji Wu. I didn't expect them to be alive. Immortal Lord Crocodile sighed. "Jean Miao, go back and report that I'll go find them in a few days. I'll definitely help you pass the message." Jean Miao stared at Bai Changchun and sneered. "Immortal Lord, please wait for a moment. Let me capture this person first. Otherwise, I won't be able to report back empty-handed." Immortal Lord Crocodile waved his hand. "You don't have to worry about this. When I see Yi Shao and Ji Wu, I'll explain to them. You can go back first." Jean Miao's eyes flashed. "Immortal Lord Crocodile, that's not appropriate." Immortal Lord Crocodile glared at Jean Miao and shouted, "Jean Miao, how dare you talk to me like this?" His aura surged. He was indeed angry. That surging aura almost suffocated Yu Qianqiu. Suddenly, a righteous aura appeared in front of him, counteracting the pressure he had to bear. Bai Changchun had lent him a helping hand. Jean Miao raised his eyebrows. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and narrowed his eyes. "Immortal Lord Crocodile, do you really think you're qualified to be one of the 12 great immortal lords with your current cultivation? One must know one's own limits. Don't be shameless. I'm being polite to you because the immortal emperor conferred you the title of immortal lord. Do you really think you're something now? You want to see 2 immortal lords? Believe it or not, even if I kill you right now, no one will say a word about it. I'm definitely going to take you away. You'd better know what's good for you. Don't make things difficult for yourself." The dozen people around him burst into laughter. They were laughing at immortal Lord Crocodile for overestimating himself. "How dare you?" Immortal Lord Crocodile roared. His weakness was poked, and he immediately flew into a rage. He spread his arms, and a majestic aura spread out. He was about to make a move. However, someone beside him said lightly, "Immortal Lord, step back for now." Bai Changchun stepped forward and stared at Jean Miao and the others. "I hope you have the ability to take me away. Don't let me down." Everyone instantly felt an indescribable aura suddenly erupt from the thin body. The entire mountain peak gave off a feeling of majesty that instantly melded with the heavens and earth. Suddenly, the green-robed body seemed so tall and big. Under that thin face, his lips moved slightly, and a sonorous Sanskrit chant resounded through the sky. "There is righteousness in heaven and earth." A majestic pressure suddenly descended from the sky and gushed out from the ground, surging between heaven and earth. It could not be seen or touched, but it felt so clear and intimidating. These immortals with high cultivation looked around in horror. The willfulness that they usually had when they soared between heaven and earth had suddenly disappeared. At this moment, in the face of the power of heaven and earth, they suddenly felt so small. Jean Miao's pupils shrank. She looked at Bai Changchun in disbelief and shouted, "Kill him! Righteousness, condense!" As soon as she finished speaking, the majestic aura in the surroundings instantly condensed and pressed down like thousands of towering mountains. The huge pressure made the eyes of the dozen people who were extracting immortal treasures bulge. Among them, 2 of the weaker ones exploded into 2 clouds of blood mist on the spot. They finally understood that once the power of heaven and earth was unleashed, it was not something that could be resisted by humans. The rest of the people who were extracting immortal treasures had become slow motion. They were suffering from the huge pressure of resisting the power of heaven and earth. Bai Changchun stared at them indifferently, expressionless. Immortal Lord Crocodile and Yu Qianqiu stood beside Bai Changchun. Although they could feel the terrifying power of heaven and earth, they did not feel any pressure. But from the actions of the people floating in the air opposite them, they could see that this inexplicable power was indescribably strong, because 2 immortals could not resist it and died on the spot. Yu Qianqiu's mouth turned into a circle, and his eyes shone brightly. He did not know how to express his admiration for the old man. In short, he still worshipped the old man as always. Damn! Immortal Lord Crocodile's lips were tightly shut, and the muscles on his cheeks kept twitching. He stared at the back of the thin figure in front of him in a green robe. At this moment, Bai Changchun stretched out his right hand from behind his back. He raised his palm and slowly lifted it up. Under the heavy pressure, a steady stream of air squeezed in from all directions and gathered in his palm. A dazzling light burst out, and the ball of light grew bigger and more dazzling. Suddenly, the withered palm moved, shuttling through the ball of light, changing into an unfathomable trajectory. Finger shadows intertwined, and countless sharp white lights burst out from the fingertips. In the blink of an eye, thousands of streams of light flew toward the dozen people floating in the air opposite them like a storm. The scene of cornucopia green eyebrows being struck down flashed in Yu Qianqiu's mind. He said in a daze, "Immortal lost finger." Chapter 740. Immortal Lord Crocodile's ears twitched. He glanced at Yu Qianqiu and memorized the name, Lost Immortal Finger. Thousands of beams of light closed in. One could feel the powerful penetrating power of each beam. At the critical moment of life and death, Jean Miao had no choice but to risk his life. With a loud "hi," he bit the tip of his tongue and spat out a mouthful of blood. Taking advantage of the slight relaxation of the huge pressure, a golden light suddenly flashed out from the bracelet on his wrist, and a large golden umbrella opened up. Bang bang! The flowing light bombarded the golden umbrella, causing continuous explosions. The golden umbrella emitted a pale golden light. The umbrella's rim shone and enveloped Jean Miao, removing the huge pressure around him. The golden umbrella slowly rose and floated above Jean Miao's head. Jean Miao, who had a mouth full of blood, heaved a sigh of relief. He moved around with the golden umbrella, but the pressure outside was still too great. He could not escape, so he gave up. His sinister face was like an owl as he stared at Bai Changchun. Although he had managed to escape this calamity, the dozen or so people around him were not spared. All of them were turned into sieves by the sharp lights. Once injured, they immediately lost the ability to resist the pressure and exploded into a dozen clouds of blood mist. Because of the huge pressure, they did not even have the chance to scream. Just like that they died. Golden umbrella. Immortal Lord Crocodile frowned. Yu Qianqiu immediately asked, "What treasure?" Immortal Lord Crocodile stared at Jean Miao and explained. He was one of the 24 protectors of Immortal Emperor Jin Tai's throne room. Every protector was given an immortal treasure by Grand Master Jin, and the one in his hand was a top-grade defensive immortal treasure. With his cultivation, without the help of a powerful treasure, even Jin Tai himself would not be able to break it. Jean Miao's gaze turned to Immortal Lord Crocodile and he sneered. "That's a very clear explanation. The Immortal Emperor favored you. I didn't expect you to become a traitor." Immortal Lord Crocodile glanced at Bai Changchun, who had stopped attacking. Don't you want to kill me too? I want to see how you leave here today. Ha! Jean Miao looked up to the sky and laughed wildly. I admit that this old man's methods are extraordinary, but he's dreaming if he wants to break through my golden light umbrella's defense. I will hide in the golden umbrella and not come out. Let's see what you can do to me. Immortal Lord Crocodile frowned. Although he was unhappy, he knew that he was right. The golden light umbrella's defense was indeed very strong, and it was indeed very difficult to break through. Even if I can trap him here forever, it's not a solution. I turned to look at Bai Changchun, hoping that he would have some ideas. Bai Changchun slowly closed his eyes. Little did he know that he was also stumped. From the fact that his attack had been neutralized, he could tell that it would be very difficult for him to break through the power of this umbrella with his current cultivation, unless he had the help of some treasure. As the saying goes, someone sends you a pillow when you're dozing off. Yu Qianqiu looked at the arrogant guy who was laughing wildly. He wanted to rush up and kick him, but he couldn't do anything with his own abilities. Just as he was angry, he suddenly froze. He foolishly took out the dark golden sword that had suppressed Immortal Lord Crocodile for more than 100,000 years. He looked at Bai Changchun, then at Immortal Lord Crocodile and said, "Can this thing break through his defense?" Immortal Lord Crocodile's gaze fell on the divine sword, and he suddenly clapped excitedly. He pointed at Jean Miao and laughed loudly. "Jean Miao, consider yourself unlucky to have encountered such a good thing. You're dead today." Bai Changchun couldn't help but open his eyes to look at the thing in Yu Qianqiu's hand. Jean Miao was slightly stunned. He stared suspiciously at the sword in Yu Qianqiu's hand. Suddenly, his eyes widened and he said in shock, "Myriad Swords Demon Lord, this is one of the Myriad Swords Demon Lord swords. Why is it here?" His eyes were filled with disbelief. Any cultivator who was trapped in the Heaven and Earth universe formation would recognize this thing. Not only did they recognize it, but it was deeply engraved in their hearts. It could be said that he had been terrified by this thing in the past. It would be strange if they didn't recognize it. "It's useful?" Yu Qianqiu shook the thing in his hand and asked suspiciously, "It can break his golden umbrella?" Immortal Lord Crocodile laughed loudly. "It's very useful. This is a divine artifact, and not an ordinary one at that. It's indestructible. I don't know how many celestial treasures have been turned into scrap metal in the past. Breaking his golden umbrella is like using a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. Damn it, why didn't you say so earlier?" Yu Qianqiu pointed the sword in his hand at Jean Miao and said, "Be ****, who asked you to be so arrogant? Watch how I kill you." He took a step forward and realized that it was difficult to move forward. The pressure in front of him was too great, and he couldn't overcome it at all. "Yu Qianqiu, make the sword bigger. Lend it to me." Immortal Lord Crocodile laughed loudly. He rolled up his sleeves energetically and said, "How dare he look down on me? Let me deal with him personally." "No problem." Yu Qianqiu laughed sinisterly. Sometimes he liked to help the wicked do bad things. Immortal Lord Crocodile cooperated with him and shouted, "Bigger, bigger." At the blink of an eye, a slightly deformed giant sword appeared. The hilt was still small, and in Yu Qianqiu's hand, the blade was more than 10 meters long. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and asked, "Is this enough?" Immortal Lord Crocodile nodded repeatedly and said, "Almost." As he said this, he grabbed the divine sword. When it landed in his hand, it felt heavy. It was simply too heavy, a full 108,000 kilograms. He had no choice. He couldn't control it, so he could only use brute force. Fortunately, with his cultivation level, he could still hold it. "Brother Bai, please loosen the path for me. Let me deal with that despicable person with my own hands." Immortal Lord Crocodile smiled at Bai Changchun. Bai Changchun looked at the two of them shouting, "Big, big, big." His expression was a little. He nodded slightly in agreement. Once the pressure in front of him lessened, Immortal Lord Crocodile immediately flew over with the giant sword, landing in front of the golden umbrella and laughing lewdly. Looking at the giant sword, Jean Miao was a little stunned. He immediately said in horror, "Immortal Lord, I was too presumptuous just now. We can talk things out." "Wait, If you push me too far, I will self-destruct and die with you. A despicable person like you? You don't have the guts to self-destruct even if I asked you to. Are you willing to be destroyed forever? As Immortal Lord Crocodile spoke, the giant sword in his hand swept horizontally. With a whoosh, it directly cut through the golden light curtain that sprinkled down from the umbrella. As expected of a divine sword, its indestructible sharpness went without saying. It sliced through the golden light curtain like a knife cutting through tofu. The giant sword was too big, and there was almost no space for Jean Miao to dodge. Jean Miao, who was under the umbrella, exclaimed, "Immortal Lord, spare me." There was a scream, and blood spurted out. The person under the umbrella was cut in half. The golden umbrella, which had lost its magic power to support it, was put away. A huge pressure surged, and immediately the two halves of the body exploded into two clouds of blood mist. At this moment, the huge pressure disappeared instantly, and the thick pressure also dissipated between heaven and earth. Everything returned to normal. Immortal Lord Crocodile grabbed the golden umbrella, wiped away the remaining divine sense inside, and threw it to Yu Qianqiu. "Take this. Your cultivation level is low, so I'll give you a good life-saving item." Yu Qianqiu caught the closed golden umbrella and winked at it. He turned around and hugged it, fondling it as if he was hugging a sexy and enchanting beauty. "What a shame. I've never seen this before. Put away your divine sword." Immortal Lord Crocodile returned the sword to Yu Qianqiu, who quickly shrunk it. He held the sword in one hand and the umbrella in the other. He looked at both sides and nodded with satisfaction. One was an indestructible divine sword, and the other was a golden umbrella with amazing defense. It was a perfect match. Good stuff. Bai Changchun frowned slightly and stood still, as if he had gained some enlightenment from the battle just now. Immortal Lord Crocodile walked over and sighed. "Brother Bai's methods have really opened my eyes. The power of heaven and earth comes and goes at your beck and call. I wonder what this technique is. Do you have a name for me to admire?" Bai Changchun glanced at him and said calmly, "Let's call it the morality technique. I've gained some enlightenment, but it needs to be perfected. There is morality in heaven and earth. Righteousness. Morality technique." Immortal Lord Crocodile took a deep breath and looked into the distance. He shook his head and clicked his tongue. "Not bad, it's a good name. Just the name alone was enough to make one ponder. There is morality in heaven and earth, and morality is everlasting and mighty. The power of heaven and earth. Don't underestimate it, don't underestimate it." Bai Changchun looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was hugging the treasure and smiling. He said, "Immortal Lord Crocodile, I would like to ask you some questions." Immortal Lord Crocodile turned to face him. "I've lived for hundreds of thousands of years, and there aren't many people that I truly admire. You, Bai Changchun, are one of them. If you have any questions, ask away. I will tell you everything I know." "You flatter me," Bai Changchun said calmly. "The treasures used by human cultivators are relatively crude. I'm not knowledgeable, and today is the first time I've seen such a strong defensive immortal treasure like the golden umbrella. There must be many similar treasures in the netherworld and immortal world. Do you really need to use a treasure that can restrain it to break it? That's hard to say. Usually, other than using the corresponding treasure to break it, you can only rely on your strong cultivation. If that doesn't work, you can only escape and wait for a chance to sneak an attack," Immortal Lord Crocodile said slowly. When Yu Qianqiu heard this, he immediately understood Bai Changchun's apprehension. Obviously, it was because of what happened just now. He walked over with the two treasures in his hands and offered them to Immortal Lord Crocodile. "Master, you should take these two treasures with you. With them, you should be able to solve a lot of problems." Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Yu Qianqiu with a hint of surprise in his eyes. He nodded slightly. However, Bai Changchun shook his head. "These are not suitable for me. If I use them too often, I'll become dependent on them. You should use them sparingly. It's best not to use them unless you have no other choice. Using too many of them will only harm your cultivation. You're on your own." With that, he turned into a green stream of light and flew into the sky. Yu Qianqiu was speechless as he held the two treasures. He didn't expect to be taught a lesson for his good intentions. But as he watched the green stream of light disappear in the sky, he felt suffocated. After this farewell, he didn't know when they would meet again, and he didn't know if they would have the chance to meet again. Chapter 741. Old monster, do you think my master is a match for that two-palace immortal lord? Yu Qianqiu asked, looking in the direction where Bai Changchun had disappeared. Based on his current cultivation level, to be honest, it will be difficult. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked up at the sky and said, actually, you don't have to worry. Since the heaven and earth Qinkuan array can't trap your master, he should have no problem escaping. At least Yi Xiao and Ji Wu won't be able to chase him out of the array. Forget it, the old man asked for it. Yu Qianqiu muttered. He put away the two treasures in his hands and quickly flew down the mountain. He scuttled into the collapsed forest and searched around. Immortal Lord Crocodile was curious about what he was looking for. When he found a bracelet in the grass, he realized that this guy was looking for the storage bracelets that those people had lost. Not long after, Yu Qianqiu flew back to the top of the mountain with a dozen bracelets in his hands. He used his divine sense to check them one by one. After looking through them, Yu Qianqiu's expression did not look too good. There was nothing in them. Other than some that he did not recognize, there were pitifully few spirit stones left. They were not even as many as the spirit stones in the bracelet of the Immortal World's envoy on the Immortal Ascension platform. Logically speaking, this was impossible. The envoy's level was obviously lower than these people. Old monster, I don't know if I'm blind, but can you help me see if there is anything valuable in these bracelets? Yu Qianqiu stuffed the bracelets into his hands. Immortal Lord Crocodile was stunned, but he still checked the contents of the dozen or so bracelets and found that there were indeed very few items. Apart from a few decent immortal artifacts, there was really nothing valuable. He thought for a while and understood what was going on. He returned the bracelets to Yu Qianqiu and said with a smile, of course there is nothing valuable, but the quality of the immortal artifacts inside is not bad. If it was in the immortal world, it would be worth some money. But in the human world, it might not be worth the price it should be. Yu Qianqiu put away the bracelet. He had no intention of selling the immortal equipment in the cultivation world. If these immortal equipment were to be sold to the cultivation world, it would simply be looking for trouble for himself. Frowning, he said, you said that it's inevitable that there's nothing valuable. Why do you say that? The consumption of spirit stones by immortals is far greater than that of mortal cultivators. After being sealed here by the heaven and earth cosmos formation for more than 100,000 years, they must have used up almost all the things that could be consumed. Even if there are spirit stone mines on this continent, I reckon that there will be too many people and not enough meat. Everyone will not be able to eat their fill, Immortal Lord Crocodile said with a smile. I see. Yu Qianqiu sighed and shook his head. I wanted to make a fortune from them, but I was happy for nothing. Immortal Lord Crocodile asked casually, why? Are you short of spirit stones? Yu Qianqiu would never tell others that he was rich. Instead, he liked to complain about being poor. He replied subconsciously, I'm poor. I'm poor. Immortal Lord Crocodile paused for a moment, and then said solemnly, I still have some spirit stones with me. If you really need them, I can give you some. Yu Qianqiu, who had asked casually, was stunned. His eyes lit up as he said, you have it? How many do you have? Immortal Lord Crocodile checked his storage bracelet and said nonchalantly, not much, just about 400 million divine grade spirit stones in total. Touch. Yu Qianqiu quickly dug his ears, thinking that he had misheard. He asked expectantly, you said that you have 400 million divine grade spirit stones? Did you say it wrong, or did I hear it wrong? Are you sure it's 400 million divine grade spirit stones, not 400 million high-grade spirit stones? Nonsense, my cultivation hasn't fallen to the point where I can't even see clearly. Of course it's 400 million divine grade spirit stones. Immortal Lord Crocodile said firmly. Yu Qianqiu shuddered at these words, and he walked towards Immortal Lord Crocodile with trembling hands. The expression on his face was as detestable as it could be. Immortal Lord Crocodile stared at him and said solemnly, "Brat, what's wrong with you?" Yu Qianqiu hugged Immortal Lord Crocodile's waist, burying his head in Immortal Lord Crocodile's arms as he wailed, "Old monster, from today onwards, you're my master. You're 2F** King Rich? Scram!" Immortal Lord Crocodile bellowed. He had never been hugged like this by a man for so long, and goosebumps rose all over his body. Who knew that Yu Qianqiu wouldn't let go no matter what? He shook his head and said, "You're too rich, you're not human. You're a god in my heart. You're my god of wealth. Hugging you is the same feeling as hugging money." Immortal Lord Crocodile was taken aback. This guy was excited because of money. He said solemnly, "If you want spirit stones, just say it. Don't be so disgusting. Say it. How much do you want?" Yu Qianqiu loosened his grip, revealing a pitiful expression as he weakly stretched out a finger. Immortal Lord Crocodile's face darkened. "You really dare to ask? With your current cultivation, do you think you need so many spirit stones?" After saying that, he reached out and pulled the storage pouch from Yu Qianqiu's waist. He casually glanced at it and was immediately taken aback. He looked at Yu Qianqiu suspiciously, wondering why this fellow had an empty storage pouch on him. Where did he put those things just now? He didn't think too much about it, and directly took out a pile of shiny black spirit stones from his bracelet and put them into the storage bag. Then he threw the storage bag back to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu's hands trembled as he picked up the storage bag and examined it. It would have been fine if he hadn't taken a look, but when he did, he was shocked. There was a huge pile of shiny black spirit stones in the storage bag. There were actually 100 million divine-grade spirit stones inside. Yu Qianqiu thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. He shook his head and looked at the storage bag again. But the truth was the truth. No matter how he looked at it, there were 100 million divine-grade spirit stones inside. Yu Qianqiu's eyes widened, and he staggered several steps back as if he was struck by lightning. He couldn't believe it. He had wanted to ask Immortal Lord Crocodile for 1,000,000 divine-grade spirit stones, but the other party misunderstood and gave him 100 million, 100 times more than what he wanted. Oh my God! A divine-grade spirit stone was worth 100 million high-grade spirit stones. How many high-grade spirit stones was 100 million divine-grade spirit stones worth? Damn it, I can't calculate it. In any case, I'm rich. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Huang Xiaolong's behavior and scolded, "What the hell are you doing?" Yu Qianqiu regained his senses and hurriedly stuffed the storage bag into his robe, sending it back to Utopia. He was afraid that the old man would go back on his word. In any case, now that the storage bag was in his hands, he wouldn't return it even if he was beaten to death. With an astronomical amount of wealth in his hands, Yu Qianqiu felt comfortable all over. He no longer had to worry about being unable to support a woman. Patting his chest, Huang Xiaolong felt more confident. He cleared his throat and looked at Immortal Lord Crocodile, asking curiously, "How did you get so many divine-grade spirit stones? Were you in charge of the Immortal Emperor's finances? What nonsense are you talking about? How can a mere 400 million divine-grade spirit stones be considered a lot? If it was in the past, Jin Miao would have been able to take it out. There were many people in the immortal world who could take out 400 million divine-grade spirit stones. These are just the ones I carry around with me. I think it wouldn't be a problem to take out 10 billion divine-grade spirit stones from my immortal palace." Immortal Lord Crocodile's expression dimmed as he sighed. "If I had known this would happen, I would have brought more with me. Now, I'm afraid they've all become someone else's wedding dress." Yu Qianqiu finally understood. If Immortal Lord Crocodile hadn't been suppressed at the bottom of the lake for so many years without anyone knowing, the spirit stones in his bracelet wouldn't have been left behind until now. However, he was still shocked by the wealth of the celestial world. People at different levels had a different understanding of wealth. Immortal Lord Crocodile's wealth alone was enough to rival the entire cultivation world. The immortal world is indeed the immortal world. There are so many spirit stones. You're wrong. Immortal Lord Crocodile shook his head. In fact, The place with the most spirit stones isn't the immortal world, but the netherworld. Whether it's the vastness of the land or the reserves of spirit stones, the netherworld has the most spirit stones. To the netherworld cultivators, spirit stones are useless to their cultivation, so very few people mine them. At the same time, the netherworld emperor strictly controls the mining of spirit stones. His main purpose is to prevent large amounts of spirit stones from falling into the hands of the immortal world cultivators to strengthen the immortal world. Of course, there are times when the netherworld uses spirit stones to trade with the immortal world. Secondly, the various feudal vassals in the netherworld secretly mine spirit stones to trade with the immortal world. This is also the main channel through which spirit stones from the netherworld flow to the immortal world. So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. The netherworld, which originally gave people a sense of horror, now made him yearn for it. He really didn't mind having more money. Instead, he felt that the more money the better, because he firmly believed that money made things easier. However, it was just wishful thinking. With his current ability, going to the netherworld was not a good thing. After coming to his senses, Yu Qianqiu suddenly asked, "I heard you and Jin Miao say that you want to visit Yi Shao and Ji Wu. Are you really going to look for them?" Immortal Lord Crocodile fell silent. After a long time, he sighed, "People are like this. Even Jin Miao doesn't take me seriously. Imagine what Yi Shao and Ji Wu will do. Maybe Ji Wu's attitude will be better, and Yi Shao has always been arrogant and condescending. Why should I go and humiliate myself?" Strength decides everything. You're finally willing to wake up from your dream. Yu Qianqiu despised him in his heart. Then he comforted him, "Old monster, don't be discouraged. An old steed has great ambitions. Life will inevitably encounter ups and downs. Whether you're a hero or a coward, the key is to see who has the last laugh. So what if it's Ji Wu? So what if it's Yi Shao? So what if he's the immortal emperor and the emperor of the netherworld? Don't you still have a lot of time to take things slowly? Now that everyone thinks that you're dead, the immortal emperor won't pay attention to you anymore. Without any hindrances, it's time for you to show your true abilities. If you don't believe me, you can wait another 1,000 years. Anything is possible. Of course, we have to start from scratch, step by step. Otherwise, everything is just empty talk." Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyes lit up at these words, and his ambition was ignited once again. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Yu Qianqiu. He said in a low voice, "Then how do you think we should start from scratch? It's very simple. We'll benefit each other. In short, we'll help each other." Yu Qianqiu coughed and said in a weaker tone, "First of all, help me find the purple flame first. Once I cultivate the Samadhi true fire, I'll burn whoever dares to stop us." Chapter 742. "That's a good idea," Immortal Lord Crocodile said indifferently. Yu Qianqiu was no fool. He naturally heard the sarcasm in Immortal Lord Crocodile's tone, but he was happy to play dumb and pretend that he did not understand. As the saying went, if one was not thick-skinned, one should not come out. Boss Yu was experienced and knowledgeable, so this bit of provocation was nothing to him. Immortal Lord Crocodile also saw that this guy was thick-skinned and did not want to talk nonsense. He looked around and frowned. Jin Miao and the others died here. It won't be long before Yi Shao and the others find out. I'm afraid we can no longer stay here and have to find another place. Don't worry. It's very safe here. When Yu Qianqiu said this, he looked into the distance with a hint of worry in his eyes. He was not saying this without reason, because the culprit, Bai Changchun, had gone in the opposite direction. If he met guests from the immortal city on the way, with Bai Changchun's personality, it was inevitable that he would fight. The culprit had already shown himself. Those immortals could not be expected to collect the corpses of Jin Miao and the others. Immortal Lord Crocodile was slightly startled, but he also understood from the worry in his eyes. The two did not say anything more. They flew down the mountain, turned a corner, and appeared in the forest on the other side. When the two walked to the Moon Lake, there were no more cannibals by the lake, and the tents at the foot of the mountain had been cleaned up. While Yu Qianqiu was puzzled, he saw many heads peeking out of the caves on the mountain. They were all frightened by the movement outside and all hid in the caves. Knowing that the two warriors had returned, Garland was the first to run out of the cave, heading straight for Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was truly speechless towards this passionate woman. He allowed her to directly enter his bad side, and his face was also bitten a few times by her. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at this scene coldly and said, "I was wondering why you kept staying here. Turns out you're having an affair with this woman." Yu Qianqiu immediately took the time to reply, "Then you've wronged me. This is their custom. The women of the tribe like warriors the most. If you have the ability, then put that stinking face of yours away. I guarantee that there will be unexpected consequences." Seeing that the people outside were safe, the clansmen in the cave came out one after another. Immortal Lord Crocodile glanced at the crowd and found that many women were staring at him. He was speechless. He believed Yu Qianqiu's words. "What happened over there?" Garland asked as he hung around Yu Qianqiu. "I don't know either." Yu Qianqiu denied it immediately. He then pushed Garland's muscular body away and said solemnly, "Clan leader Garland, can I proceed with my test now?" Garland's expression froze, and he immediately remembered what the test was. He waved his hand and said, "You are the strongest warriors here, so you don't need to be tested. You can stay here as long as you like." What a joke! A single person had killed a moonlight crocodile that the entire clan couldn't deal with. Why would he need to take the postgraduate entrance exam? Yu Qianqiu didn't care. He didn't want to trouble himself. He smiled and said, "Clan leader Garland, we are indebted to your clan for taking us in. We don't know how to thank you. Therefore, we have decided to participate in the fence meeting on behalf of your clan." The news that the new torture master of the demon region was Nyo Yud had spread throughout the entire cultivation world. In particular, the news that Nyo Yud had intimidated more than 100 soul formation cultivators and forced each lord to hand over 200 million superior-grade spirit stones shook the entire cultivation world. This disappearance was too shocking. Normally, the person who was humiliated would not expose his own shortcomings. No one knew who had spread this news. In an instant, Nyo Yud's prestige in the cultivation world increased greatly. Bai Changchun, who had already left the cultivation world, was gradually forgotten. At least, the haze that shrouded the entire cultivation world had completely disappeared. As for the title of the #1 expert in the cultivation world, it was undoubtedly pushed to Nyo Yud by everyone. Most people didn't expect that Nyo Yud would actually take over Bai Changchun's position. It seemed that Nyo Yud was an immortal from the celestial realm. This made the cultivators in the world sigh. Bai Changchun had left, and now Nyo Yud had come. The demon region was still mysterious and powerful. It was the same for generations, and it was still inviolable. At this time, the forces of the various countries finally began to attack the Chinese cultivation world. After the Chinese cultivation world knew that the soul formation cultivators of the various countries didn't dare to trespass after being warned by Nyo Yud, they were relieved and united to fight the forces of the various countries. This time, the various sects of China had to fight with their lives on the line. The other party was serious and wanted to snatch his territory. Once they lost, it would be a matter of life and death. Therefore, the old guys who had been cultivating in seclusion came out one after another. In an instant, the Chinese cultivation world erupted with shocking combat power, and the battle situation was extremely tragic. In general, the Chinese cultivation world was still weak, but the gap was not big. After all, the various sects of China still had a strong foundation, except for the lack of soul formation cultivators. The reason why the Chinese cultivation world was able to resist the joint forces of the various countries was because the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce, which was the most powerful and had the most disciples, didn't participate in this battle. Otherwise, the World Commerce Chamber would definitely be a powerful force that could change the balance. Among the various countries, the Di-Rong Kingdom and the Baiwan Kingdom didn't participate in this battle either, which greatly reduced the pressure on the Huaxia Empire. Facing such a stalemate was really out of the expectations of the various countries, and it was somewhat embarrassing. More than 300 countries had joined forces, but they still couldn't deal with the Chinese cultivation world. After the various countries discussed, the various lords had no choice but to bring out 80% to 90% of their strength for the sake of their own reputation. With this, the various countries finally invaded the Chinese cultivation world, and the forces of both sides started a life-and-death battle within the Chinese territory. At this critical moment, the supporting immortal island could be said to have erupted. Not to mention the various countries, even the Chinese cultivation world was shocked. Originally, the supporting immortal island had used more than 30 tribulation-passing realm experts, and everyone thought that was the limit of the supporting immortal island. Who knew that at this critical moment, the supporting immortal island would suddenly send more than 50 tribulation-passing realm experts to participate in the battle. These people were all people that the various sects thought were long dead, but unexpectedly, they were all alive and well. They were all hidden by the supporting immortal island and had broken through to the tribulation-passing realm. In total, the supporting immortal island had invested more than 90 tribulation-passing realm experts, and the other tribulation-passing realm disciples were mobilized by the hundreds and thousands. Tens of thousands of disciples of the cultivation pavilion, regardless of their cultivation level, as long as they were at the foundation establishment realm, they would all be bathed in blood. Based on this calculation, without the soul formation experts, the supporting immortal island could almost match the strength of the World Commerce Chamber. This kind of strength was really shocking, and people couldn't help but sigh. The so-called number one sect in the world wasn't an undeserved reputation. It was indeed valiant. With this kind of strength, even in the entire cultivation world, the supporting immortal island was completely worthy of the title of number one sect in the world. With this kind of strength, the 10,000 demons wouldn't be outdone by the supporting immortal island's move. Originally, they had mobilized more than 20 tribulation-passing realm experts, but at this critical moment, more than 30 people that everyone thought were dead actually appeared. Moreover, they were all tribulation-passing realm experts. In total, the 10,000 demons had invested more than 60 tribulation-passing realm experts. In addition to the tens of thousands of disciples from the sect, it was a huge force. It didn't diminish the prestige of the number one sect in the demonic path in the slightest. The actions of the two sects shocked the other sections. These two sects had actually hidden such a strong strength. What exactly were they planning? Even so, with such strong reinforcements appearing on their side, no one cared about anything. This immediately boosted the morale of the other sects, and they began a crazy all-out counterattack. In the end, the allied forces of the various countries suffered heavy losses. It wasn't just heavy losses, it was quite heavy losses. In this crazy counterattack of the Chinese cultivation world, the allied forces of the various countries lost about a third of their strength. Just like that, the balance of power was completely lost. This battle couldn't be fought anymore. In an instant, the various countries' forces were chased out of the Chinese cultivation world. People couldn't help but marvel at the might of the Chinese cultivation world. The situation of the battle dumbfounded the lords of the various countries. Pei Fong was so angry that he scolded, supporting Immortal Island and the 10,000 demons, "These two bastards, they actually dared to play dirty with me. They actually hid so many tribulation-passing realm experts behind them. Don't ever fall into my hands, or else I'll teach you a lesson." However, after scolding them, he had to admit that the Chinese cultivation world was indeed the birthplace of the world's cultivators. When they flew into a rage, it was extraordinary. Then, Pei Fong began to scold the various countries for not putting in enough effort. He scolded them for not being united, which was why they suffered such a great humiliation. After an all-out war, the various countries' forces had no choice but to temporarily cease the war. Meanwhile, the Chinese cultivation world was in high spirits. If it wasn't for the fact that the various countries had soul formation stage experts, they would have wanted to counterattack the other countries. After this battle, the Chinese cultivation world's morale soared. They realized that the various countries' forces were actually not as terrifying as they had imagined. Little did they know that among the nearly 100,000 cultivators from the various countries, Most of them were cultivators at the core formation stage and above. There were more than 400 tribulation-passing realm experts. Meanwhile, the Chinese cultivation world only managed to gather about 300 tribulation-passing realm experts with all their might. The supporting Immortal Island and the 10,000 demons accounted for half of them. There were many other cultivators, probably more than 200,000 in total. In fact, in terms of strength, the various countries' forces were not weaker than the Chinese cultivation world. This was because they had more experts, which was an important factor in determining the outcome of the battle. However, the various countries' forces were indeed not united, just as Pei Fong had scolded. It was fine when they first attacked, but once they entered the Chinese territory, they followed the orders of their superiors and focused on searching for the star bead. They were simply worried that it would fall into the hands of others, so they wanted to strike first to gain the upper hand. Meanwhile, in order to protect their homeland, the Chinese cultivation world worked together to form a united rope. It should be known that the power of unity was terrifying. Therefore, the various countries' forces gave the Chinese cultivation world a chance to divide and annihilate them. They gradually nibbled away at them until the final battle, when the balance of power changed. In the end, the Chinese cultivation world won. Chapter 743. It was no wonder that Pei Fong was so anxious. Among all the feudal lords, he, Qi Jiujuan, and Ouyangde were the strongest when they worked together, and he was the most outstanding among the three of them. The ones who gained the most from conquering China's cultivation world were the three of them. Everyone was searching for a bead like finding a needle in a haystack. Naturally, the strongest faction had a higher chance of finding the star bead. However, everyone was not united and had their own selfish motives. Who didn't want the star bead? Even Qi Jiujuan and Ouyangde's factions were doing the same thing after invading China's cultivation world. Actually, Pei Fong was most likely referring to Qi Jiujuan and Ouyangde when he scolded them for not being united. However, they were allies and it wasn't good for them to fall out, so he could only scold them indirectly. As for the others, he didn't put them in his eyes. So what if he found it? At most, he would just snatch it. After all, his strength was right there. How could everyone not know what Pei Fong was planning? Naturally, they would strike first and gain the upper hand. Speaking of which, when Pei Fong scolded everyone, he should also reflect on himself. Before invading China, the three factions led by him had impatiently divided up Huazongming, Pu Taidong, and Yanji's territories. He thought that he had taken the majority for granted. His actions had already disappointed everyone. If everyone still didn't do it for themselves, then the three factions would be a good example. As for the star bead that could cause a war between immortals in ancient times, everyone wanted it even more urgently. In the end, the various countries' factions were defeated by China. Although Yu Qianqiu was in the eastern sacred land, he would often sneakily find Hong Qi and Gu Qingyun to get information. After learning that China's cultivation world had defeated the various countries' joint invasion, even he was very surprised. He couldn't help but marvel at the strength of supporting Xian Island and 10,000 demons. These two factions were truly sinister. As expected, there were many hidden dragons and crouching tigers. It was very difficult for outsiders to figure out their ins and outs. If it wasn't because they were forced into a corner by the various countries, who would know that these two factions had hidden so many tribulation-passing experts? However, what puzzled Yu Qianqiu was that since supporting Xian Island and 10,000 demons had so many tribulation-passing experts, why hadn't there been a spirit-severing expert after so many years? Excluding the possibility of Bai Changchun scaring him away, that shouldn't be the case. Could it be that there was a saying that the people of different places were nurtured by different people? Or could it be that there were some secrets that he didn't know about? Speaking of which, Hua Xia was quite unlucky. The cultivation world was at war, and the army was at war. Everything was in chaos. Even Hong Qi and Gu Qingyun had the desire to participate in the battle, but Yu Qianqiu strictly forbade them to only watch and not participate. However, there was one exception. No matter who it was, as long as they dared to interfere in the secular world's war, the Green Gang and the Hong Gang would make a move at all costs. As for him, Yu Qianqiu, He wouldn't be polite either. He didn't mind putting aside the matter of the East Holy Land for now. The war in the cultivation world made Yu Qianqiu even more determined. Both sides actually mobilized so many cultivators. There were more than 300,000 cultivators participating in the war. It was comparable to a chaotic battle between armies. He couldn't help but ask, was it necessary for so many cultivators to exist in the human world? If this went on, would the human world still be the world of ordinary people? It must be reduced. Because of this, Yu Qianqiu was even considering whether he should make a fake star orb and throw it to the various countries. He reckoned that it would cause internal strife, right? If he was asked if he wanted the star orb, he would undoubtedly want it. Ever since he first heard about this thing, he had always wanted it. However, the impact of this thing was too great. It caused turmoil in the three realms. Even the immortal emperor and the emperor of the underworld coveted it. If he said that he wanted it, he would be too stupid. Some things couldn't be said out loud and could only be hidden in his heart. He was determined to help Shi Wenguang conquer the world, yet he could just casually take something and send him away? Even he didn't believe it. No matter how lively the cultivation world was, as long as it didn't provoke him, he temporarily didn't participate and only watched silently from the back. Because he had found a new route to the top, and that was the East Holy Land. He had always believed in walking the path of the top. The lower his cultivation, the more he should walk the path of the top. His experience from his previous life told him that this was the best way to rise quickly. There was a saying in his previous life, if you followed an official for a long time, you would be a low-ranking official, if not a high-ranking one. This saying could also be applied to the cultivation world. If you followed someone with a high cultivation for a long time, even if your current cultivation wasn't great, your future cultivation wouldn't be too bad. In fact, as long as he had the chance, he would always do this. Reality proved that the effect was pretty good. Taking the current immortal crocodile for example, he had only followed him for a few days. Just a few spirit stones from him would be many times better than him fighting for his life in the cultivation world for so many years. The World Chamber of Commerce run by Yin Baikong was considered good at doing business, right? But even after so many years of accumulation, he didn't earn as much as he did in a few days. This was the benefit of walking the path of the top. Not only were there many benefits, but it was also very beneficial to improve one's foresight and experience. He had only been with Immortal Crocodile for a few days, but he was already starting to look down on the fights between the top experts in the cultivation world. Take your time to make a fuss. Once I've made a name for myself in the upper echelons, it'll be a piece of cake for me to deal with you. Spirit Fong Valley. The disciples of the valley and the Wen family searched the entire territory, but they couldn't find Yan Zhuixing and third brother Exin. Lu Yanqing knew that it was useless to continue searching, so she finally gave up. Wen Lanfeng also lost his reason to stay and had no choice but to leave. When the news of Niu Yud taking over as the torture master of the ghostly region reached the two of them, they were really speechless. Especially when they heard that Niu Yud had extorted 200 million top-grade spirit stones from more than 100 soul formation experts. They didn't know whether to laugh or cry. As expected, this was Yu Qianqiu's style. It was simply incomparable to the arrogant Bai Changchun. To think that this guy could think of something like this. He was too bold to dare to use Niu Yud's name as a prank. They really didn't know what Bai Changchun was thinking. He actually passed the position of torture master to Yu Qianqiu. Could this troublemaker really take on such a heavy responsibility? Looking down from the plateau at the top of Medicine Hut, Spirit Fong Valley had resumed its previous heroic deeds of saving the world. There were endless pedestrians on the mountain road in the distance. Under her beautiful face, which was like the morning glow reflecting the snow, her red lips opened slightly and sighed. She said, I originally thought that after Bai Changchun left, there would only be two people in the entire cultivation world who could take on the position of torture master. One is Nongzhu from the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest, and the other is you. I didn't expect that Bai Changchun would let Yu Qianqiu succeed as torture master. Bai Changchun's actions are a little thoughtless. You think too much. How can I be the torture master of Ghost region? Bai Changchun must have his reasons for doing this. When Lan Feng smiled faintly. Although he looked calm on the surface, he felt inexplicably uncomfortable. To be honest, although he didn't want to be the torture master of Ghost region, he secretly thought about it based on seniority. If he removed the relationship between Nongzhu and Bai Changchun, it was possible that Bai Changchun would really ask him to take over as torture master. As for Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu, these two cheeky fellows, they would definitely be able to trick immortal Lord Crocodile into becoming friends with their words. Bai Changchun had already seen this before. Back then he had fallen for Nongzhu's trick and helped him take the blame for so many years in the Ghost region. Not to mention Yu Qianqiu, Bai Changchun had already heard him call immortal Lord Crocodile an old monster. The two of them were almost in the same boat. If there was any trouble in the Ghost region that couldn't be solved, Yu Qianqiu would definitely ask immortal Lord Crocodile to help. Chapter 744. Later, news came from Xianxian Island. After Bai Changchun left, Nongzhu and Yu Qianqiu were coveted by the lords of various countries. Nongzhu even killed Hu Zongming, Pu Taidong, and Yan Ji in anger. Although the crisis was finally resolved, when Lan Feng secretly felt ashamed. He regretted that he did not help Nongzhu at the critical moment because of his selfishness. After all, Nongzhu had saved his life twice at the most critical moment. The two people standing on the platform of the medicine hut each had their own thoughts. Lu Yanqing was now thinking that after the lords of various countries left Xianxian Island, why did Niu Yud, also known as Yu Qianqiu, appear in Shuntian Island? Could it be that Yu Qianqiu was faster than a cultivator of Huashan realm? No matter how she thought about it, it was a little strange. How could Niu Yud frighten the lords of various countries? It should be known that this group of people would not release the eagle without seeing the rabbit. It was impossible to frighten them without seeing it with their own eyes. Unfortunately, those who had suffered a loss did not want to mention this matter again. No one knew what had happened at that time. In any case, the group of people obediently took out 200 million high-grade spirit stones, especially Pei Fong, who was forced to take out 300 million. The more Lu Yanqing thought about it, the more curious she became. Now she found that Yu Qianqiu came and went like the wind. She rarely heard about his route. He always appeared here and there suddenly. Wherever he went, he could stir up a big commotion. Or he simply disappeared, completely disappearing in front of everyone. And when he appeared, there was a lot of scolding everywhere in the cultivation world. He was not afraid of being scolded and could not be beaten to death. He ran around everywhere, appearing and disappearing like a ghost. For example, now, when the cultivation world was in a state of chaos, Yu Qianqiu had completely disappeared from the cultivation world. There was no news about him in the entire cultivation world. Could he really behave and pretend to be Niu Yud in the demon realm? Lu Yanqing faintly felt that it was somewhat impossible. In fact, Lu Yanqing also understood that although Bai Changchun was a proud and aloof person, he was definitely not a person who would act recklessly. However, what Lu Yanqing could not understand was why Bai Changchun would choose such a reckless person to be his disciple and even let him take over the demon ghost realm. Could there be more to it? Of the two torture envoys of the demon ghost region, one had the highest cultivation base in the world and was arrogant, while the other, Lu Yanqing now felt that Yu Qianqiu was like a riddle, laughing and scolding, showing his true nature. He was also a real villain, but she could not figure him out, as if he was hidden in the fog. Lu Yanqing thinks that she just wants to see what secrets are hidden behind Yu Qianqiu, but she doesn't know that when a woman starts to be curious and concerned about a man, that is the beginning of the disaster. Especially when that man's world was filled with legendary colors. The more one understood, the more dazzling it would be. The two people on the cliff fell into silence. When Lan Feng slightly exhaled and broke the silence, Yanqing, should we go to the demon ghost region to pay a visit to the new torture envoys, Niu Yud? This was the only excuse he could find to spend more time with Lu Yanqing. However, Lu Yanqing gently shook her head and said, "The rules of the demon ghost region do not allow trespassing. It's not good to go there rashly. Let's talk about it later." She believed that with the enchantress and Yan Yu here, Yu Qianqiu would not leave them alone and would come. When Lan Feng paused and slightly sighed, "Then take care. I'll go back first. Remember to find me if there's anything." "This time, thank you." Lu Yanqing nodded her head and expressed her gratitude. When Lan Feng shook his head with a wry smile, stepped forward and flashed into the sky, in the great snow mountain of Di Rong country, the secret chamber in the belly of the mountain was filled with red fog. It was so thick that the movement inside could not be seen, and the smell of blood was still pungent. Yan Juexing's astonished voice came from inside. "Niu, you took over the demon ghost region?" Outside the secret chamber, Bing Qingzi, who was guarding at the door, said, "Yes, the news is true. But it's really surprising that Bai Changchun would choose him to take over the demon ghost region. I thought it was either Nongzhu or Wen Lanfeng. This Bai Changchun is really powerful. He can even pull the guide of the immortal world to take over his demon ghost region." During this time, Bing Qingzi almost never left the door of the secret chamber to protect Yan Juexing. He did not want Yan Juexing to encounter any danger again, because Yan Juexing could not be so lucky to escape from death every time. If something really happened to Yan Juexing, it would be an unbearable burden for him. Years of hard work would go down the drain. For safety reasons, he even summoned the snow flood dragon to the door of the secret chamber. One man and one flood dragon each guarded one side. The security was tight. In the secret chamber filled with red fog, a white figure suddenly shot out. The snow flood dragon's head stretched out and shrank like lightning and bit into its mouth. A bloodless naked girl was directly swallowed into the stomach of the snow flood dragon. Having eaten another delicious meal, the snow flood dragon shook its head in satisfaction. Its bright red eyes stared at the secret chamber, seemingly wanting to continue. Bing Qingzi, who was sitting cross-legged, just casually glanced at it. At first, he was a little uncomfortable about using living people to practice demonic arts, but now he was used to it. Every day, several virgin girls would be sent to the foot of the mountain. It was unknown how many of them had been used up until now. If it was in other countries, it would have already aroused the vigilance of others with the constant disappearance of girls. But with the identity of the state preceptor of Di Rong country, it was a piece of cake for him to settle this. Moreover, Di Rong country was originally Bing Qingzi's territory. Capturing a few poor girls was nothing to him. Yan Juexing, who was hiding in the red fog in the secret chamber, continued Bing Qingzi's words. He gritted his teeth and said, "It's all because of him that I have to hide like this. So what if he is an immortal from the immortal world? When I succeed in my demonic arts, I will definitely let him know the power of my demonic arts. I will make him beg for death." A sharp roar echoed in the passage of the mountain for a long time. The cannibal tribe by the moon lake was singing and dancing. The atmosphere was very warm, for no other reason than to send off the warriors participating in the fence contest. The cannibal tribe was just a small tribe with a few hundred people. For many years, the 3 strongest warriors would be selected to represent the tribe in the contest. Originally, the 3 warriors had already been selected. But because Yu Qianshou's enthusiasm affected Immortal Crocodile, the 2 of them replaced the other 2 warriors. With warriors like the 2 of them participating in the contest, the cannibal tribe was naturally very happy. Based on their bravery in killing the lake monster, they would definitely qualify for the contest. However, the 2 of them were outsiders, and they were only temporarily taken in by the tribe. How could they let the guests replace them? Garland represented the cannibal tribe and repeatedly refused, but Yu Qianshou held an incredibly sincere attitude and continuously tried to convince everyone. In the end, the entire cannibal tribe was moved, and they allowed those 2 fellows to represent the cannibal tribe. Immortal Crocodile didn't know what was going on. After chatting with Yu Qianshou a few times, he actually agreed to accompany him to participate in such a boring thing as the fence contest. After thinking about it, he felt that something was wrong. How could he have agreed so carelessly? But since he had agreed, he couldn't go back on his word. In the end, he decided to let nature take its course. Once they decided to participate, the 2 of them realized that they had to solve a lot of problems to attend the fence contest. First was the problem of Immortal Crocodile's cultivation. To be honest, although immortal crocodile's cultivation was very high in the past, it was nothing in the Eastern Holy Land now. It was very easy for other immortals to see through his identity as an immortal cultivator. They were willing to participate in the fence contest as an immortal cultivator, but others definitely wouldn't. So they had to hide it. So Yu Qianqiu took out the breath-concealing pill and gave it to Immortal Crocodile. In the end, Immortal Crocodile thought that the pill was too low-grade, or rather, too insignificant, so he took out something better to hide his cultivation. As for Yu Qianqiu, he was born with a special ability, so he didn't need to use anything to hide his cultivation. As long as he didn't expose himself, others wouldn't be able to see through him. But there was one big problem that gave both of them a headache. Immortal Crocodile almost went berserk because of this problem, but Yu Qianqiu persuaded him to back down. He even said a lot of inspirational things about enduring hardships and waiting for an old horse to return to the stable. It was really hard on him, and even he felt like he was sick of it. There was no other reason than their appearance. Yu Qianqiu was easier to deal with, but the key was that Immortal Crocodile's appearance was too eye-catching. He had a burly figure, snow-white hair, and an elegant silver robe that flowed like silver silk. It was very eye-catching. If an immortal cultivator saw him walking out, their first impression would be that he was either an immortal or a monster. It would be strange if they didn't suspect him. So the two of them began to change. Garland quickly asked his clansmen to hurry up and make clothes that matched the style of the cannibals. In fact, it was just a few pieces of animal skin. After putting it on, they realized that it was really too revealing. Even Yu Qianqiu was too embarrassed to walk out of the tent, let alone Immortal Crocodile. No matter what, he was one of the 12 great immortal lords in the immortal world. How could he do something that was almost naked? In the end, it was Yu Qianqiu who relied on his eloquence and courage to walk out of the tent first. Immortal Crocodile gritted his teeth and followed him out. As soon as the two of them appeared, they immediately shocked the cannibals. Their fair skin made the eyes of the cannibal women, who had bronze-colored beauty, light up. They wanted nothing more than to swallow the two of them into their stomachs. This problem was exposed in time. Both of them realized that they had to solve the problem of skin color. Otherwise, it would be too weird to walk with the cannibals. So Yu Qianqiu dragged Immortal Crocodile to sunbathe, saying that the skin color would be more realistic and would not be exposed. In the end, after a few days of exposure, the two of them realized that because their physiques were extraordinary, it was unlikely that they would be tanned in a short period of time without a few years of hard work. After much effort, Immortal Crocodile, with his rich experience, finally came up with something that would not be easily seen through. The two of them smeared some ingredients on their bodies and turned their skin bronze. Immortal Crocodile's long silver hair was also smeared with another color of ingredients. The two of them worked for a long time before solving all the problems that needed to be solved. Chapter 745. The sun had just risen, and the cool morning breeze was cool. The ripples on the moon lake were clear and moving, and the water plants by the lake swayed beautifully. Surrounded by hundreds of cannibals, Yu Qianqiu and Immortal Crocodile walked out of the tent. The two of them were almost half naked, facing everyone's gaze without fear. Anyway, everyone was like this. Birds of a feather flocked together. There was nothing strange about it. However, the two of them stood in stark contrast. Compared to Immortal Crocodile, who was almost 2 meters tall, Yu Qianqiu looked a little weak. Fortunately, he had been practicing the animal show for a long time, so his tight muscles did not make him look weak. Yu Qianqiu, who was wearing beast skin boots and a leather skirt, walked in front of the majestic horse with large strides. He flipped his braids in an incomparably coquettish manner and directly jumped on the horse. Garland, who was leading the horse for him, looked resentful and reluctantly handed the reins to him. Yu Qianqiu quickly pretended not to see it and turned his head. The 6 of them all got on the horse. The 3 warriors were Yu Qianqiu, Immortal Crocodile, and Boli. The other 3 were to help them. The moment the 6 of them got on their horses, the crowd of clansmen parted to make a path for them. They danced wildly on both sides. More than 20 animal skin drums were arranged in 2 rows. Intense, peng-peng sounds rang out as they sent the warriors off. Boli led the way, pulling the reins and galloping away. Yu Qianqiu followed closely behind, followed by Immortal Crocodile and the remaining 3 tribesmen. The 6 of them rushed into the winding path in the distant forest, disappearing from the anticipating eyes of the tribesmen. The winding path in the dense forest was winding, and if one's horsemanship was not good, it was easy to crash into trees or run into bushes. Fortunately, the 6 of them were good horsemanship, and the branches and leaves on both sides quickly flashed past their ears. Yu Qianqiu, who was following behind Boli, suddenly heard Immortal Crocodile's voice behind him. That woman's eyes were very clingy. She took off all her clothes and touched you a few times at night. I can't believe you could resist it. He was naturally referring to Garland. Old monster, you actually peeped on me while I was sleeping? Yu Qianqiu replied angrily. What are you shouting for? Do you think I don't know that you're spying on me? Immortal Lord Crocodile sneered. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. It wasn't that he was a peeping Tom, but Immortal Lord Crocodile's actions shocked him. She had thought that he would be reserved, but who would have thought that this old monster would actually have a taste of meat in the cannibal tribe? He seemed to not reject anyone, and every night, he would have sex with several women. How heroic! Yu Qianqiu was curious and could not help but use his spiritual sense to check every night. But then again, with the other party's cultivation, it wouldn't be difficult for him to discover that he was peeping. It was just that he didn't expect the old monster to be so vigilant even when doing things. It was really surprising. The horses galloped through the forest, and the sound of hooves rang out incessantly. However, the 2 of them were silent. Let's not talk about each other. Neither of us was a good person. But after a while, Immortal Lord Crocodile transmitted his voice again. Yu Qianqiu, if you can't help me recover my cultivation in 500 years, don't blame me for being impolite. You've said it 100 times. Do I look like a liar to you? Don't mention it in the future. I'm sick of hearing it even if you don't say it. Yu Qianqiu gave a perfunctory reply. In order to get Immortal Lord Crocodile to be his bodyguard, he had spent a lot of effort. In the end, he made up a white lie that he could help him recover his cultivation in 500 years. Only then did he manage to tame Immortal Lord Crocodile. Otherwise, why would Immortal Lord Crocodile accompany him everywhere? He had already calculated that if the 2 of them were really together for 500 years, even a rock would feel warm. He didn't believe that the old monster would really do anything to him. If Immortal Lord Crocodile was really that heartless, then he had nothing to say. He would leave, and Immortal Lord Crocodile would continue to stay in the Eastern Holy Land. They would pretend that they had never met. If his cultivation was higher than Immortal Lord Crocodile's in 500 years, of course, Yu Qianqiu was just imagining it. He didn't think that his cultivation would surpass Immortal Lord Crocodile's in 500 years. In fact, Immortal Lord Crocodile wasn't that gullible. However, the master-disciple pair's methods were really unimaginable and too magical. Although he didn't believe that he could recover his cultivation in 500 years, he still had some hope in his heart. What if he really succeeded? It was better than spending tens of thousands of years to cultivate again, right? Moreover, 500 years was really nothing compared to his long lifespan. It was worth a try. In the end, he more or less felt an indescribable charisma from Yu Qianqiu. He realized that it was quite interesting to be with this guy. Although this guy wasn't a good person, ever since he got to know him, he suddenly realized that having a long life wasn't lonely at all. Occasionally, he had a glimmer of enlightenment. He asked himself, what is the true meaning of cultivation? After spending half a day, the group of 6 finally ran out of the forest. They could see a road in the wilderness in front of them, stretching into the distance like a yellow ribbon. In the distance, there were many houses clustered together, and it seemed to be a small town. Boli pulled the reins and rode on the hillside. The 5 people behind him lined up and looked into the distance. In just a short while, several groups of people had run on the road. They were dressed like their own people. Although Yu Qianqiu didn't know which tribe they were from, he guessed that their purpose was similar to that of the cannibals. They were all going to participate in the fence meeting. Judging from the number of people passing by, it seemed that the cannibals were really a small tribe. At least every group that passed by had at least a dozen riders, but they only had 6 people. The sun was high in the sky. Looking at the panting horses, Boli waved his hand and pointed to the small town in the distance. The small town in front is the midpoint to Lust City. When we get there, let the horses recover their strength and continue on their way. That way, we can reach Lust City before dark when the horses are exhausted. What do you think? Facing Boli's questioning gaze, Yu Qianqiu scratched his braids and smiled. We don't know each other well, so we'll listen to you. Originally, with his and Immortal Crocodile's abilities, there was no need to run slowly to Lust City. They could just fly there, but in order to not expose their cultivation, they had to do this. Boli smiled heartily and nodded. He took the lead and rushed down the hillside. The 6 riders ran on the yellow road towards the small town in the distance. Running on the straight road was obviously much more comfortable than running on the winding path in the forest. Yu Qianqiu swung his braids in the wind. The feeling of the wind blowing through his hair was nice and cool. Seeing that they were outside the town, Yu Qianqiu was about to rush into the town, but he saw Boli slow down and pull the reins to a stop. The others also stopped. Only Yu Qianqiu did not notice that he had run too far, and only stopped in front of the town's gate. The gate made of wood and stone had a bit of an ancient charm, but the workmanship was very rough. There were many people on the streets inside. Looking at their clothes, it was obvious that most of them were people of various tribes, but some were wearing more formal long robes. Yu Qianqiu took a few glances at the streets inside and found that there were not many decent houses. He turned his horse around and saw that Boli and the others had already dismounted and led the horses to a few shady trees by the roadside. They had the intention of sitting on the ground, and only Immortal Crocodile was looking at him with a faint smile. Yu Qianqiu immediately ran over, jumped off the horse, and asked Boli curiously, "The town is in front. Aren't you going in to rest? What are you doing here?" Boli looked at the other 3 tribesmen awkwardly. Yu Qianqiu immediately became suspicious, and under his repeated questioning, Boli finally told him the truth. In fact, the customs of each tribe were quite fierce, and fights were common. It was difficult to get along well with the other tribes. The cannibals were the smallest tribe in this area, and it was inevitable for them to suffer some losses. To put it bluntly, they were often bullied. This town was called Shizi Town, which meant the westernmost town on the mainland. Originally, there was no town here. This town was built by some of the larger tribes because the nearby tribes envied the life of the people in the city. They began to learn from the people in the city to do business. The mayor was the chief of the largest tribe in the area, the Shizi tribe. Although the cannibals were small, they were a place where warriors came from. Often, there would be people who could participate in the fence contest and win generous rewards. This made the nearby tribes jealous and hateful, because there were many tribes participating in the fence contest, but there were only 100 winners. Therefore, every time the cannibals settled in the town to rest, there would always be people from other tribes who would come to provoke them, taking the opportunity to injure or disable the cannibal warriors, so that they could not participate in the contest. This method seemed very reckless, but it was an effective way to reduce the number of strong competitors. And no matter how brave the cannibal warriors were, they could not resist the large number of people. In the end, they could only compromise and rest here, not daring to enter the town. In fact, although this kind of thing sounded annoying, it was not a big deal between the tribes. Bullying the weak was completely the nature of these almost primitive tribes. But after hearing this, Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and despised Boli infinitely. "No wonder your woman was so anxious to sleep with me." After thinking about it, Yu Qianqiu also felt that he should not cause trouble here. It was not that he was afraid of the nearby tribes, but he was worried that it would attract the attention of the immortals. So he led the horse and was about to tie it up. Unexpectedly, a gust of wind blew, and a lot of things fell from the swaying branches. Yu Qianqiu felt something crawling on his head. He grabbed it, and a big green furry worm wriggled in his hand. Yu Qianqiu was originally prepared to just bear with it and let it go. He didn't want to cause any trouble, but in the end, this disgusting caterpillar caused his stomach to be filled with rage. Squeak! The caterpillar was pinched so hard that green juice shot out, and it lost its life on the spot. He threw it away and jumped directly on the horse's back. He said to Bowley in a deep voice, "Damn it! Kind people get bullied, and hiding under a tree still gets bullied by caterpillars. There's no way to live like this. All of you, get on the horse and go to the town to rest." Regardless of the consequences, he rode all the way to West Town. Bowley and the others looked at each other. Immortal Crocodile had already gotten on the horse with a smile, and they had no choice but to follow. On the other side, Yu-Qian-Cho directly charged into the town on his horse. He madly rushed from the west to the east of the town, completely ignoring the pedestrians on the road. He used his horse's hooves to clear a path, startling the people on the road into cursing. Before the curses had died down, he ran back from the east. Immediately in the middle of the street, he looked at a 2-story wooden building and muttered, "This is the most luxurious one." Chapter 746. The so-called most luxurious was only because it was much bigger than the other houses. Yu-Qian-Cho had just jumped off his horse when Bodo and the others arrived. Yu-Qian-Cho pointed inside and said, "We'll rest here." With Immortal Crocodile leading the way, the others also dismounted. Under the gazes of the people on the street, Bodo and the other 3 vigilantly gripped the knives on their waists. Yu-Qian-Cho looked at the knives on his waist and said disapprovingly, "What's wrong? Are you afraid that there'll be danger if you rest here?" Bodo lowered his head slightly and said in a low voice, "This shop is owned by the Shizi, we cannibals can't afford to rest here." What he meant was that the Shizi would rip them off in terms of price. Yu-Qian-Cho raised his eyebrows and stretched out his hand. "Didn't you bring money? Give me the money pouch." Bodo was startled, but out of respect for this brave warrior who could kill the lake monster, he untied a small cloth pouch from his waist and handed it to him. Yu-Qian-Cho was about to take it when he heard someone yell, "How dare you scare my people by horse racing in town?" 7 or 8 people quickly rushed over. Just as Yu-Qian-Cho was about to ask what they were up to, the leader of the group suddenly snatched the money pouch from Bodo's hand. Weighing the pouch in his hand, he looked at Yu-Qian-Cho in disdain. "This pouch of money belongs to us. We'll take it as you scaring our people." Before he could finish, there was a flash of cold light, followed by a streak of blood. Before anyone could see what was going on, they found that the person's hand that was holding the money pouch was gone, leaving only a bare arm. Blood suddenly spurted out from the dark red stump. The knife on Yu-Qian-Cho's waist had moved to his right hand at some point, and his left hand was holding Bodo's money pouch with a severed hand. His movements were so fast that the person only realized that his hand had been cut off when blood spurted out of his hand. Before he could finish screaming, he saw a cold light flash by, and a large head flew into the air. Yu-Qian-Cho raised his leg and kicked the man's chest, sending him flying a few meters away. Blood spurted out from the wound on his neck. Yu-Qian-Cho didn't even bother to look at it. He pulled off the broken hand that was holding onto the money pouch and muttered, "What a F***king problem, asking for a beating." In just a few moments, the people on the street who were prepared to watch the show were all stunned. Bowley and the other 3 were already dumbfounded. The street instantly became very quiet. Immortal Lord Crocodile's face also twitched slightly. He thought to himself, "How ruthless." The other 7 people who had come with the dead person only now realized that their clansman had been killed. Their eyes turned red, and without any warning, they all pulled out their knives and charged at Yu-Qian-Cho. Yu-Qian-Cho raised his head slightly and charged into the crowd with quick steps. A series of punches, kicks, and saber lights danced in the air. 7 heads flew up and 7 corpses fell to the street with blood spurting out from their mouths. Their bodies were still twitching, and only after a long while did they stop moving. Yu-Qian-Cho shook off the blood on his knife and put it away without a change in expression, as if nothing had happened. To him, killing a few mortals was not something to be happy about. The quiet street suddenly burst into an uproar, and everyone looked at Yu-Qian-Cho with reverence. Bowley and the other 3 looked at Yu-Qian-Cho with admiration. He was indeed the warrior who killed the lake monster. Immortal Lord Crocodile's eyelids twitched uncontrollably. He couldn't help but want to ask this kid what he had been doing before he started cultivating. The clean and sharp close-range combat just now was very familiar, and had nothing to do with the level of his cultivation. It was normal for people to die in battles between tribes. In addition, there were no legal restrictions, so it was completely up to the winner to decide. The loser could just blame it on his bad luck and take revenge if he had the ability. Under everyone's gaze, Yu Qianqiu expressionlessly carried the money bag and entered the shop. The people who were standing at the entrance to watch the show quickly retreated. Boli and the other three led the horses into the small alley next to the shop. They found the stable and placed the fodder for the horses before returning. When they entered the shop, they saw that Yu Qianqiu and Immortal Lord Crocodile had already taken a seat. The table was filled with sumptuous meat dishes. Yu Qianqiu waved them over and let them eat to their heart's content. Boli and the other three were still a little worried. After all, things wouldn't be so peaceful outside. After all, Yu Qianqiu had killed the people of the second largest tribe in the area, the Wasi tribe. Yu Qianqiu tasted everything and found that it didn't taste very good. He immediately lost his appetite. Immortal Lord Crocodile obviously didn't like these things either. He casually took a bite and threw it aside. He turned to stare at Yu Qianqiu and transmitted his voice. "Kid, you killed to your heart's content. Have you ever thought about the entire cannibal tribe? Are you worried about those old lovers who accompany you every night?" Yu Qianqiu said nonchalantly. "Don't worry. I have my own plans." While transmitting his voice, he poured all the money in the bag onto the table. There were 2 gold coins and hundreds of silver coins. Neither of them had ever seen the currency used in this continent before. They each picked up a piece and examined it. The printing was quite exquisite. There were portraits on both sides of the coin. One side was a man with a cold face, and the other side was a beautiful woman. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at the portraits on both sides of the coin and could not help but snort. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. After looking at the coin again, he transmitted his voice. Could it be Yi Xiao and Ji Wu? Who else could it be other than them? Tisk tsk. So Ji Wu is a beautiful woman. Yu Qianqiu exclaimed. He looked back at Boli and asked, "How long will this money last us?" Boli put down the deer steak in his hand and said embarrassedly, "1 gold coin can be exchanged for 100 silver coins. There are about 300 silver coins here. If we use them sparingly, we should be able to use them until the end of the preliminary round. This is all the money left in the clan." Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. It seemed that the cannibals were not very well off. But it did not matter, he had money. With that thought in mind, he reached out and lifted the fur skirt around his waist. Under Immortal Lord Crocodile's suspicious gaze, he grabbed a handful of things and placed them on the table. A pile of shiny golden objects appeared on the table. Everyone at the table was dumbfounded. It turned out that what Yu Qianqiu had taken out were shiny gold coins. They seemed to be newly minted coins. Without saying anything, Yu Qianqiu took out another 5 or 6 handfuls of coins and put them on the table. Immortal Lord Crocodile reached out and grabbed a few pieces to verify their authenticity. They were all genuine. The engraved heads were exactly the same as the ones he had seen before. They did not look like replicas. "Where did you get so many gold coins?" Immortal Lord Crocodile asked in surprise. "My master gave them to me," Yu Qianqiu said perfunctorily. Immortal Lord Crocodile did not doubt this answer. Little did he know that Yu Qianqiu had casually made these coins using the gold seal, and the purity of these gold coins was quite high. Yu Qianqiu put all the coins on the table and in Immortal Lord Crocodile's hands into a money bag. He threw it to the dumbfounded Boli and smiled. "Now you don't have to worry about money. Whatever he wanted to eat, he just let it go. I'm going to find a place to pee." He secretly sent a voice transmission to Immortal Lord Crocodile. "I'm going to send the old and young of the cannibals away. I'll be back soon." With that he left. About 2 hours later, they saw him walk in. Boli and the others looked at each other. They did not know where he had gone to pee for such a long time. They were already full. Immortal Lord Crocodile asked via voice transmission, "You sent them all out of the Holy East Lands?" Seeing Yu Qianqiu nod slightly, he did not say anything else. In fact, Yu Qianqiu had sent all the cannibals to Utopia. It was just that it was not convenient for him to say it. After eating, the bill went smoothly. There was no haggling. He only spent 1 silver coin after ordering so much meat. Even Boli and the others felt it was strange. It seemed a little too cheap. Yu Qianqiu did not think much of it. He guessed that the shopkeeper was frightened by his killing move. Immortal Lord Crocodile laughed coldly as if he knew something. Just as they reached the door of the store, Boli suddenly stopped and said, "We don't need to participate in this fence meeting anymore." They all turned around and looked at him, not knowing why he said that. Boli raised the bulging money bag in his hand and said, "This much gold is enough for our people to live for many years. More importantly, we just offended the Wasi tribe. They will definitely take revenge on us. We need to go back and protect our people." The other 3 clansmen looked at each other and nodded their heads solemnly. Immortal Lord Crocodile looked at Yu Qianqiu with a mocking expression, as if saying, "Who asked you to kill so many people? Who asked you to give them so many gold coins? Who asked you to send the cannibals away? Now you're getting your retribution, aren't you?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He did not expect himself to make a fool of himself. His face darkened as he said, "No, we have to participate in the fence meeting." You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.